Let me make sure this is correct. Yes, line 1, perfect. Desktop audio, I don't think we'll need. All right, okay, that seems to be working. Okay, bear with me. I'm having one of those jittery mornings where I'm like, I'm awake, but not really. Let me go ahead right off the bat. YouTube playlist. Okay, I remember YouTube. So, part 1 of what we did here is essentially, let's go ahead and I'll get caught back up to where we are beginning right here. So in part 1, if you go to my YouTube channel and you look for the big blue genie here, this is the live stream full episodes. Here's the Salacious B Crumb Star Wars part 1. So I'll go ahead and link this directly. You know what? This index is probably going to change if you're clicking this years from now, but for what it's worth, there is the area where you'll find it. And let's go ahead and talk about where I left off. So we did a block out of the head, and we did polygroups. Let me go ahead and minimize this. And let me go ahead and load this up. Okay, so we had a version of this where we had the head separate and the arm separate and the body separate, and then they were all Dynamesh. What I basically did, if I go in here to geometry, lowest resolution, turn on polyframe, go into solo mode. That's creepy looking. I went through and I merged the ears. I did a union mesh. If I hit W, hit this little gear icon, there is a remesh by union. So instead of Dynameshing everything together, actually, I think I have to do this again. Let me see. Yes, I'm going to have to do it again because the arms didn't union mesh and the legs didn't union mesh. So, okay, that's not terrible. So, basically what we have here, and so we're going to have to merge all these things together. So here is the kind of just a sculpted, updated high-res of the head, and then we have the body here that's, has these poly loops here. And I went through and changed the poly loops on the arms. These were from the actual ZSphere, so I just went through and cleaned these up. And like we talked about before, when you go through and you make a poly group, so if you go through here and do like a visibility poly group, so just grab some of these things and hit Control W, or you go through here and grab a mask lasso, and then you hit Control W, you'll end up with these. Let me see, delete lower. You'll end up with like these little aliased lines, these little stair-step lines. So how we fix that is a couple different ways to fix that. One way is hold down Shift. We're in Smooth Brush here. I'm going to go into our Smooth Brush modifiers. I'm going to change this weighted smooth mode to 6 groups border, and then you just go through here manually and it'll just smooth the border out between 2 polygroups. Of course, if you have a ton of polygroups, you want to do that all at once. And we want to protect our details, even though there's not a ton of detail on there. So what we'll end up doing is going down here to, let me see, masking, mask by features groups, turn that on, that'll go ahead and mask them out. If you want to, you can also like grow it and then Control Tab to invert it, and then deformation, which is right above it. Deformation, polish by features, just crank that to the right a couple times. You could even turn on this, what is this? Polish open circle, which it'll lose a little bit of volume, but it'll smooth it out even more. And that'll go ahead and smooth that line out. So when we go through and ZRemesh this, it won't try to build in that aliasing. And we don't want to lose detail all over. So when you go in here and say keep groups and then smooth groups is up, it'll smooth the groups for you, but it'll also smooth the mesh in a way that you can't explicitly control, which is iffy. So that's how we're going to control all of that. So now let's get rid of those polygroups we just made. So we have just an updated head sculpt, which is literally just like what we did last live stream. Standard brush, Damien standard brush, Dam standard 02, which you can look up on the internet. Dam standard 02, just for like doing a little bit of creature sculpts. Broke symmetry down the middle a little bit, and I think we're ready to merge everything together. Two things I'm going to leave. Well, a number of things I'm going to leave out. The tail Actually, I don't need to merge everything together because I've already done it. All of these things are merged into one subtool. I just need to remesh by union, ZRemesh based on these polygroups. After I remesh by union, project my details back, history, project my details back, and then this will all be one mesh. I'll go through and update. So, but what we've left out as I go through here and turn solo on and off is obviously we don't want to ZRemesh the eyeballs. We want those to be separate so we can move them around. The beak is, I'm kind of going back and forth on the beak. Y'all can give me your opinion. It looks like a separate material, and then there's actually even kind of a dividing line. Let me see if I can get the beak here, separate material, a skin dividing line, but the color kind of blends it together. The bottom one's really ambiguous. It kind of just blends right in the bottom of the face. I'm inclined to leave them separate just because I tend to do that. Obviously the tongue will be a separate mesh, so I think I'll leave them separate and then just blend with color. But anyway, oh yeah, the Star Wars card template. Yeah. I always try to think of like a interesting way because at the end of the day, all I have is like this. Let's go to skin shaders so you can see it a little better. I have this, it's a block out. It's not overly pretty, but is there a way I can present this that would be interesting at all, that can be done quickly in Photoshop? And luckily the Star Wars cards pulled through. So I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking, Tamoya. John Yu, hey. Hello, everybody. Twitch stream is still down. So I using the word explicitly a lot today. I explicitly went in and logged into Twitch and went into my OBS settings and nothing has changed. I don't understand why it would be having streaming problems. I'm logged in. I don't know. Okay, I'll go down the rabbit hole maybe today of how to fix that. Isn't a beak, especially bones, should be separate skin like a horn would? I think so. It's just in the reference, it's kind of ambiguous. On the bottom jaw, it kind of just fades from skin, and actually now that I'm looking at it, it actually fades a little bit more, a little bit later than what I had. This is actually a little forward. Yeah, the top one looks like that for sure. The bottom one is a little more ambiguous, but I think you're right. I think if it's a beak, leave it separate and call it a day. Like you said, it's a bone. We'll build up some skin around it. I think that'll be fine. Why don't you use Sculptors Pro? Any reason behind it? I use it. I tend to use it when I'm transferring data from a high-res to an envelope mesh for 3D printing, mostly, honestly. But there are some instances and some brushes that work a lot better. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I don't remember. Now, when we're about to do what we're about to do, so let's go down here, subdivision level 1. Yeah, so what we're doing now is, if this was a Dynamesh, then I would be much more inclined to be like, okay, I'm going to use Sculptors Pro along with Dynamesh or whatever I need to use to kind of block out my shape. But now what we're going to do, let's go ahead and turn our color off. We're going to be transferring to a subdivision mesh. We have to maintain the relationships between our subdivision level 1 and our higher subdivision level. So we can't use Sculptors Pro because that would change the vert order because it tessellates on the fly. So from here on out, no more Sculptors Pro. Even if I was inclined to use it, I couldn't. So that's the only caveat there. But generally speaking, if I'm blocking out a shape, you're right, I don't use it a ton. But there are, if I can remember them as we move forward, I'll try and remember, because there are certain brushes that just work way better with Sculptors Pro. Yeah, sorry about that. Audio but no image. I don't know why it wouldn't be streaming. That is so. That's what a pain. Finish up Sculpt Alligator Texture I was doing 3 hours. Texture is complicated. Give me I used a lot of Snapping Turtle reference on the belly of my Ninja Turtle that I did. But yeah, and we'll do a little bit of that today too, maybe going through and doing maybe a slightly more detailed polypaint. So anyway, we'll get rocking and rolling. So the head's pretty much set up. Oh, let's go and turn this off. So here's the body. These are basically all the subtools I'm going to merge together. And I'm actually kind of freaking out a little bit because I don't know why I wouldn't have done that. I literally, looking at what I did last night, I must have been out of it. I ZRemeshed everything on the polygroups that I wanted, and I never did a union mesh. Like I swear I went in here and said remesh by union. Maybe it threw up an error and I wasn't paying attention, but boy, that's bad if that's the case. I need to, I don't know, reevaluate my life. So I'm going to say Control-Shift-Click this, Control-Shift-A to visibility grow all. I'm just going to ensure that these polygroups are nice and smooth and there's not going to be any conflict. So when I merge these together, what's going to happen here is I'm going to have a little sliver of red, which isn't ideal. So again, what I might do is just say, I'm going to mask this entire body section out. And then I have to decide, do I want to add that red edge ring? So I maybe go through and pull the body out like this. So I have a purple and then a red and then the leg body polygroup. Or do I just hide the red? And I think I'm just going to hide that red. There we go. And then we got polygroups where I want them. Okay, so now what we need to do is right now, if I go into my move brush, we go in here to auto masking, topological. I always like to change that range down to 1, just if I get in here to these little tight spots in here. So if I go through here and, like, for example, move this arm around, it's a completely separate mesh. From the neck, from the head, it's completely separate mesh. So we need to merge all these together. Now you could say, hey, okay, I know how to merge things, Dynamesh. Unfortunately, when you Dynamesh, what's going to happen is I mean, even at a higher resolution Dynamesh, it's going to go through here and just merge all of these little tight areas together. And we already have nice smooth polygroups. I don't want to have to go through, Dynamesh this together and then have to go through and clean up these polygroups and smooth them out again. Speaking of, before I transfer my details, any areas like this that have overlapping geometry aren't going to transfer that well. So I am going to go in here temporarily and we're going to scooch these down and up and hold down shift to smooth just to separate these areas out, and then I'll go back in and kind of pinch that together. That'll also give ZRemesh a little bit of an easier time to make that shape appropriate. Okay, enough talking. So we have our high res information is here, and let's go ahead and smooth this out so we can, again, I'm going to try to minimize. Hold down shift to smooth, go back down here to smooth brush modifiers and change this to weighted smooth mode of, I like to do smooth stronger, which is a weighted smooth mode of 1. So we'll go ahead and smooth that corner out and then we'll build that back in. Okay. Same thing for the upper lids here. I'm gonna just go in here and we'll put it back in, but I'm gonna temporarily smooth this area out just to get a little bit of a better transfer from my high res to my any other weird crazy overlapping. No, I think we're good. And then I'm gonna look back here real quick, Control-Shift-A, clean that up here. Control-Shift-A, sorry. And hopefully this isn't a boring stream because some of this can get tedious when it's just kind of a little bit of little baby cleanup work. It's not the most thrilling thing to watch. Oh, and we got a little chewed up star in the middle that I need to go and fix. So here is our name catcher. However, if I go in here to the body, it looks like I have a remnant of a little star in here. So I'm gonna hold down Control Shift and Alt to get rid of it, and then Control Shift and Alt over these parts here. Okay, so now these are all isolated points here. So I'm going to Control Shift drag, so that's inverted selection and geometry modified topology. I can't delete hidden yet because I have subdivision history. So here's what I can do. I can say delete lower temporarily, say geometry modified topology, delete hidden, and then I can just reconstruct back 2, 3. So now we have our subdivision history back, we have our high res back, and now I think we're finally ready to transfer our details. Maybe. Just trying to make this, oops. And then geometry, let's go ahead and turn off topological. Yeah. Sorry, it's a little bit of tedious work up front, but I'm trying to minimize cleanup work down the road. Okay, so we have a bunch of undo history here. I don't really need to see that, and I need to be careful that I want to select the latest version of this for high res. So sometimes what I'll do is go in here to edit, delete older undo history. That'll clear that out, and then all I got to do is hold down Control and tap this point in history. This is going to store all of these points and their point data in space, which means their position and any RGB information that we may want to transfer. In this case, I don't really want to transfer that. That was just temporary for marketing reasons. So high-res points are stored. Then I'm going to go back down here to subdivision level 1, and we're going to say delete higher. And then I'm going to take one last look. I don't want any super cramped polygroups here, so let's turn on topological again. So I'm going to try to move these out just a little bit. And by that I mean, like, if there's any super tight areas that are going to have projection errors and or any really like slivers of polygroups that could cause problems, I want to get rid of those. I think we're looking okay. So one more time, I'm going to try this. I'm going to turn off X symmetry. I don't think it'll matter. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, again, we don't have subdivision history. We're going to say remesh by union. That's going to run a Boolean operation on here. So these points are now all stuck together. And the other cool part about that is this is a fairly, I think, a fairly clean line. It's not great. And in fact, I'm going to take a real quick look through here, and I'm going to say, it looks like there's a little bit of a, sometimes when this happens, it's just a drawing error. So I might go through here just to kind of fix that a little bit. Z modeler brush, bridge, 2 points. I'm just going to click here and click here just to give that a little piece of geo. Okay. If there's any really tiny areas in here where there's two verts really close together, but they're not welded, I'm going to do a really quick geometry modify topology weld points here. And in fact, maybe change that weld distance up a little bit. I don't want to go crazy with this. Maybe a little crazy, but yeah, something like that. Okay. And then I think we're ready to have, and you know what? I shouldn't have X symmetry on because the neck isn't symmetrical, but I'm actually most of the body is symmetrical, so I'm going to cheat this a little bit. I'm going to have X symmetry turned on, so turn on X symmetry, and then I'm going to go through here and say ZRemesh. It's at 35,000 active points. That's actually pretty good, I think. So I'm going to say, I can say same, or I can literally go through here and just say, hey, you know what? About 36 active points. Keep groups, smooth groups down to 0. ZRemesh. Okay. Yeah, sorry about Twitch. Not sure what's going on there. Have any thoughts about 3D code as a software dealing with voxels over topology, etc.? No real opinions. I should probably go in there and use it more. It's been a while since I've actually had a reason to go in and use anything really, unfortunately. So I haven't done a lot of content creation. So no, I haven't used it a bunch. Nothing wrong with it. By all means, use it. But okay, so we've gone through and we've ZRemeshed. I think this would actually transfer pretty well. I always like to look for, number one, look for like little issues of like little areas where geometry is hung up a little bit, or it's having some problems, or it's starting to introduce maybe just any problem areas, any slivers of polygroups. It seems to be okay. And sometimes I go in here with a really light smooth brush and just kind of just tap, and then go in here and help it out just a little bit. We have to project the details back, so we don't want to go crazy with like making changes, but just in little areas we can alleviate issues. Yeah, I think we're doing okay. Yeah, I can live with that. So I'm going to try one more time. Let's say, let's try a ZRemesh half. Oh, we have adaptive size set to 21. The lower this goes, the more uniform your geometry will be. And then the higher that is, the more it's going to build in more geometry where edge loops make a drastic change. And I think that'll work just fine too. And I always like to work with a little less geometry than more if I can help it. Okay, yeah, I think we're in good shape. So let's go ahead and get our details back onto this shape. And remember, our details aren't necessarily symmetrical, especially in this neck area. So this is our point stored in history. This is our object here. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to say subtool, project history. That's going to take those points in history and project our object here. You're going to see we're having a little bit of a projection error here because, again, we went symmetrical to non-symmetrical, so it's having problems grabbing those. However, I'm going to tap X to go out of X symmetry, hit B, H, which is H brushes, and then R as history recall. You can't use this with symmetry, and it is camera based, so just be careful when you're using this. But I'm going to hold down Shift and just do a light smooth through here, and then I'm going to use, it's the same thing as, it's similar to Z project, only you don't have to like hold down Alt or let go of Alt to snap to other points that are visible in your subtool hierarchy. I'm literally just using the points stored in history. And again, just be careful because it is looking at your camera is how to project, so it's projecting straight back. So if you like go to the side and project, it'll shear polygons through, so you don't want to do that. Okay, so I think we're good. We've projected our details back, but we still need more resolution. So I'm going to hit Control D, which is geometry divide, and then again history project, which is subtool project history here. If you wanted to turn the Polypaint on for your original points back here, I mean, you couldn't do it now, but that might be something to consider if you want to transfer Polypaint, which we didn't. And then, okay, looking okay. I'm going to hit Control D one more time, and then project history. Okay, anything major? I think we can go one more subdivision. There's some minor projection errors in here, but I'm not really worried about that around the neck and stuff. That's just separate subtools, and I can just smooth that out. And then, okay, we're at 446. Let's go for broke. Control D to subdivide, project history, and now we've got 1.785 million points that we can now go through and start detailing to final. Now again, we can't use Sculptris Pro anymore because we have to maintain the relationships between this vert order here and this vert order, so we can't change that. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn on X symmetry back on. When I'm out of X symmetry, I'll do the next stuff. When I'm in X symmetry, I'll do everything else that will allow me to be symmetrical here. So again, we'll just do a little bit of cleanup around the shoulders and the arms and the neck. And because we have subdivision history, I'm doing it at the highest now, just because it's honestly not that dense. But I could go lower while I'm smoothing. And I'm just getting, again, just alleviating the little strained projection areas around where the geometry was separate. There we go. So we're good to go. Everything's all stuck together now. And again, like I said, we'll go to final. Now, the head is obviously higher detailed than the body, so we need to, you know, just do a pass. So let me get my reference all set up. I guess we'll work top to bottom. So I'm going to zoom in on my little reference guys and try and see if we can build in some of this cool wrinkly skin, and like he's got a little musculature, and it looks like skin wrinkles and maybe a little bit of vascularity, but also maybe just loose skin. So we'll try and we'll put some veins on there, and we'll put some loose skin on there, and again we'll work top to bottom. And these little scales on the side of the head here, so I can get a better shot. Yeah, like these little scales right here, we'll add in. But pretty straightforward, I think. It's been a while since I've done a creature sculpt. And also some of this is pretty heavy, like all these neck wrinkles and stuff. You know, they start to really gather and kind of, they almost look like paper mache in some of these areas. Just kind of like wet paper over a base body there. So, okay. Okay, we're good to go. Yeah. ZBrush Total Gun and Substance Painter all went out for half the price of ZBrush with nice points. Yeah, that's a good point. Generally add asymmetry before or after UV mapping. Yeah. I guess, you know what? I guess most of the time I don't do a ton of, like, I'll do, if it's humanoid or a human, it's just UVs are symmetrical, body is symmetrical, and then any asymmetry is usually pretty subtle, for lack of a better term. So I'll just move the geometry and leave the UVs. But if you're ever doing anything crazy, like you know, like a Quasimodo type transformation where there are larger changes or crazy changes, like, you know, Elephant Man, or, you know, creature stuff that gets crazy asymmetrical, or if you're doing a crazy pose that is really gonna like tax some of your geo, and then your UVs should probably be UV'd bespoke for that pose. Those would be instances I might UV later, but generally speaking, UV before while it's symmetrical. Save form smoothing feature, holding shift and letting go as you smooth. I'm trying to think. Usually when I'm doing like a block out mesh, I'll do that. I'm trying to think of instances where it does come in handy a bit. I think it's one of those things that Paul Gabry talks about a lot. So if you listen to a lot of his stuff, he'll usually bring it up. I think he likes it a lot because it's like a default almost. But what we're talking about is if you hold down shift, let me see if I can get into an area where you can see this a little better. So here's these details here. If I hold down shift to smooth, you're going to see it's going to kind of just really not obliterate, just do a very average relaxing of the verts. And in fact, if you go down here to, we were talking about this before, polish by features, open circle and close circle. Close circle, well, if we do open circle, polish by features and crank that, it's not going to maintain my volumes, but it's really going to smooth it out. Alternatively, if you go in here and say polish by features, close circle, that will smooth out my polygroups areas and try to maintain my volumes. Same thing with the smooth algorithm. If you hold down shift to smooth, the first one, the default one, will really average those verts out. However, if you hold down shift to start smoothing and then let go of shift, it'll try and maintain your volumes, and it'll kind of spread the geo over the existing volume. And also if you get like little puckering areas from triangles that are hard to resolve, that's also a really good way to smooth those areas out without the other algorithm. In fact, if you hold down, let's see, BS smooth alt is right here. So if you did want the smooth alt to be the default, and then you could just change it to smooth alt if you wanted to. Cool. Yes. Oh, you know what? Maybe we will deck him out in some clothing, put him in a little turtleneck, little smoking jacket, or maybe a little Steve Jobs outfit would be really nice. Okay, so let's go through here and let's start detailing this up. So I'm gonna mostly work symmetrically, except when I get around the neck. I think that'll be fine. I'm not on a creature. You probably don't want to work all that symmetrically, but I'm lazy, so sue me, I suppose. So also, let's go ahead and I'm gonna fix some major volumes issues here. So like right around the shoulder and how that connects into the body. That was a, actually, so now that we're talking about smoothing algorithms, I do have the regular smooth and I do have smooth higher, or smooth stronger as my default weighted smooth mode. So what I'll go is I'll crank down the intensity. However, you'll see it's really gonna like destroy this delt. So this might be another good opportunity to like get rid of that seam line, hold down shift, let go of shift, and then it'll just smooth over my existing volume. So good call on the alt smooth, and occasionally I do use it, especially when I'm using working with lower res geo. Okay, so and also this transition here, we have a deltoid, and then we have kind of a little fat mealy monkey lizard body, and the tail again I kept separate just because I'm not sure how I want to resolve, if I want to go and animate this guy later, how that's going to work. So I'm going to hedge my bets a little bit, and we can put the tail in there later if we hold down shift and just turn everything else back on. I'll just hide that transition, which is the big skin fold, and I think we'll be okay. I'm not gonna be too worried about it. But anyway, so you know, I got my anatomy model here. Let me move this wire out of the way so I can twist and turn. All right, so let's scooch this around to the back here, and I'll talk a little bit about this now. Not that it's really spelled out in the reference, you know, from the original Star Wars reference here, but I'm going to assume somewhere in here is some sort of a shoulder girdle, and then it's going to go up here to some sort of a little chromium process, and then it's going to connect here with some sort of a spine of a scapula, and then that's going to kind of sweep down here, and there's going to be some stuff in here like the teres major, teres minor, and the, yes, okay, and the infraspinatus here. And then also this deltoid is going to attach back up to the spine of the scapula. It'll kind of flatten out, and then a little tendon area right here, and then the belly of the muscle will pick up a little bit later. So deltoid, you can talk, you know, kind of the 3 distinct heads of the deltoid, and also the front part here is going to connect into the clavicle, and then also this little, we'll call it some semblance of a pectoralis major is also going to connect to your clavicle all the way in here. And so we need to, I'm just making sure that as these things connect, they have a volume that goes from, say, his little sternum over here to his, connecting his rib cage to his humerus. I want to make sure that there's a fairly straight line. There's not, if you do stuff like this, where these things go in, then it's going to be like, what does this pec go and connect up here, and then it loops around this little the skin fold. It's like, that's not really how it would work, right? Muscles like to go here, origin, insertion, and then it's going to go straight across, and then the skin's going to follow underneath. So just making sure our volumes are where they're supposed to be. There we go. And then got our little delts here, and then he's not, he does kind of have like little muscular arms, little muscular monkey arms, so I'm just going to maintain that a little bit. His legs not so much, kind of spindly legs that aren't really that well defined, which makes sense, I suppose. But yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll maintain his little muscle volumes in here. Back here, if I can, I guess I can look on this side. So looking at this, this is another problem-ish area. Again, not a huge deal. We're way overthinking what kind of work needs to be done on this little guy, but it's fun to overwork and overthink things, right? Especially in a live stream. We'll make it nice and boring and tedious. But I'm going to go through here and I'm going to add a little bit of volume here, because if we're looking at our écorché model, what we need room for is the ability to go from our teres major, which is right here, and that's going to actually go underneath our tricep right here. So our tricep's going to go through here and go underneath the deltoid here, and then this right here is going to be our teres major, and that's going to go underneath. And it's not a huge muscle. Let's say maybe makes up this volume right here, and it is one of the thicker volumes on your scapula. So it is, you know, you want to put it in there. You want to make sure there's a volume accounting for its existence. But then up here you got a little sliver of a teres minor here, and then a kind of a flat infraspinatus. I think I'm getting these names right. It's been a minute, so if I'm getting them wrong, I apologize. Don't rush off to your Harvard anatomy final and then say, oh, but Michael called it this. I will not be responsible. So then this is here. Okay, so okay, this is all generally working. So now, again, I don't need to have him like all muscular and stuff. Just making sure my volumes are appropriate. So if anybody's looking at this, it'll feel right. Even if they don't know anatomy that well, they'll look at it and go, yeah, okay, yeah, nothing about this is really tickling the back of my head, going, something's wrong here. It should generally feel pretty good. I'm going to beef up this armpit just a little bit. It's a little pinchy in there. Okay. Yeah. All right. And then again, there's not a whole lot. And the other thing too is when you're using écorché reference, the tendency is to be like make everything emaciated and very little low body fat and stuff. But at the end of the day, this guy's a little round guy with some skin folds, so not too bad. Okay, next he's got. This is where we're going to start doing maybe a little bit of overlapping. So I got my dam standard 02. We're going to kind of make a pretty big brush size. You can go through here and kind of carve in, and then again go back in with your topological range of 1. You can start overlapping some of these forms, and or go in here with your mask pin and like mask this, and then kind of push up a little bit just to kind of get these things just to kind of sit a little more naturally. Same thing with the corners of his mouth we were talking about. You can hit W and then control drag down the mesh. That'll mask as it'll use the topology to kind of dictate where the mask ends up going. And then we'll go ahead and control tap to blur that a little bit. And then we'll go in here. Now, granted, if I unmask, I can move topologically and it won't touch the top because we have this on. If we turn this off, it'll move within the brush radius. Speaking of, BMT T is move topological, so if you just want to switch to another brush, you can, as well as, oh, here comes the brain fog. I like when I'm on a train of thought and I'm like, oh, I should mention this, and then 1.5 seconds later, I'm like, what was I talking about? So anyway, I don't know what I was talking about, or where I was going with that. Yeah, I'll talk about it more as I bring it up. As I use the smooth brush more, I should talk about it more. It's a good one. Is character supposed to be good for animation, or is it too dense? Usually that would be a conversation we'd have with, I guess, the tech rigging team, and then also the tech art team or the engineering team for performance, depending on. So whenever you talk about like, oh, is this too dense for games? You know, there's mobile games and there's Mortal Kombat, you know what I mean? So in Mortal Kombat, no, you could probably take this subdivision into Mortal Kombat, no problem. I don't know, I'm picking on Mortal Kombat, just if you have two characters on a screen in a background, you can tend to have a little more resources available for your CPU and GPU in order to, you know, throw. I've never worked for them, so I don't know if that's totally true. I'm just guessing that's the case, as opposed to, you know, a bunch, you know, 50 characters all running around on the screen at the same time. And also considering what type of game this is. If this is like a first-person shooter, where, you know, he's in the FP view or something, or it's you know, and his hands need to be super high res because they're right in the camera, or you are able to run up your characters and it's a kind of a tech demo, then yes, high is not bad. And in fact, this would be fine. This isn't terrible. Now, is it great in a sense from like animation perspective, as far as like building in these eyelids a little better and making sure that our points are where we want them for facial animation? Probably not. Although I don't know that he really animates that much. He's more of a jaw flappy kind of guy as he laughs, his little weird laugh. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say, hey, rigging team, here's my map. Actually, I probably would. If this was just a grandma pass, we can talk about that for a second. On my ArtStation page, oh, here's some resources we've already talked about, is the live stream full episodes here. You can just check this out and see part 1 of this. On my YouTube channel here, there's a bunch of like ZRemesh 2023 what's new and some other goodies. So here's this. Also, somewhere on my ArtStation page has that stuff too. So if you go down here and say, or if you ever see a project like, hey, what's this garbage pail, kids? You can click on this. You can see like a little fly through any sort of sizzle reel stuff I've done, and then also part 1 and part 2 of those live streams. So easy organization of the different projects is in here. The Ninja Turtle one with the snapping turtle belly we were talking about earlier. But more specifically, what I want to talk about is, I'm trying to remember what it looks like. It's a mech thing. There it is, ZRemesh Summit 2018. So here is the ArtStation page. And then if you scroll down, there's a ZRemesh Summit 2018 series. And in here, in this presentation, we talk about basically what is essentially a grandma pass, where you just kick in something really, I'm not going to spend a ton of time making it perfect. It's representative. So, hey, the edge loops, I'd make sure we're concentric. Everything is about where I want it, about the budget that I would want it at, and then I just do a quick bake, quick material pass, throw it over to the tech rigging team, get this rigged up, and then animators could start animating it, and it would be generally representative. Now, whenever we start getting into, it's not ideal, honestly. You would want the final mesh, and in this case, we probably would have final mesh. There's no reason not to, but if you're just getting something quick in, and you want to make sure that it's going to work in the game that you're making, or in the situation, the area that you're working in, you can throw in a proxy, essentially a nice kind of a refined proxy with materials, and let those decisions be made in context, and then you can come back and do a final, and it won't really change that much, and they can transfer weights in all sorts of ways. But anyway, so here, so we're in level 2, so in level 3, our volumes are okay, and again, he's kind of a puppet, so I'm not going to worry too much about these transitions. They're fine. So let's focus again back here up at the top, and we'll start going in here and detailing out. So we're getting pretty heavy with our detail. I don't want to go too much past this. I think this will hopefully be fine-ish. So I'm going to kind of zoom in on the eye areas of my reference and the face areas of my reference. And we'll go ahead and start making this a little bit more detailed here. So sorry, excuse me while I zoom in on all these areas. So he's got some lumps and he's got some wrinkles. Cool, I think we can do that. So again, one of my favorite brushes, let me go ahead and, this looks like this needs to be smoothed out a little bit. Also, these eye, we talked about this a little bit in part 1, these eye holes are very, very round, and these things don't overlap anymore like we had. So I'm gonna go back in here and I'm gonna make these overlap again with my damn standard 02. That goes in and it pushes in and then it kind of spreads and inflates out. So it's a really nice way to kind of go through here and just, oh, I've also alleviated, I worked on this for a couple hours last night and I had 0 problems with crashing. Granted, I was mostly just sculpting on this one object, but I went through and I deleted all the morph targets that ZSpheres added, and I think that was the problem last time, if anybody is coming here from part 1. I'm going to turn off Move Topological because that makes this a little bit laggy as we're working at high density meshes. And then again, going back in here. So one thing I wanted to bring up was, generally speaking, like on the reference, it looks like this is just like a round shape that goes around an eyeball. But if you're closing something together, they usually need something to attach to so that they can kind of squeeze and push down. So this is where, you know, I'm just gonna kind of put a little bit more of a indication of a corner here, and then maybe a corner down here. So he's got a pretty severe angle in here, but it's just something I think needs to be added just for functionality purposes. Again, just to make it feel right. Rule of cool still applies for sure. I don't want to go too crazy with being like, let's just turn it into human anatomy. But just for the feel, just to make sure that it's like, yeah, okay, I see how that could work. Even if it's just that reptile part of your brain that's picking up cues, go ahead and feeding that reptile part of the brain is good. And then we'll go ahead and just add a little bit more in here. So again, clay brush, clay buildup, standard brush, Damien standard brush to cut in, and Damien standard 02 to do the more severe cuts. Also skin direction. I don't know, again, there's not a ton of detail, so we might be going overboard a little bit, or I don't know, going more than we need to. But there is a pretty severe, I keep using the word severe. I'm like latching on to words today and then using them over and over again. I guess that's normal though. So yeah, it's not your traditional eye bag. It's like concentric ring eye bags. It really kind of makes them stand out in a really cool way, which I love. And then there's kind of like a weird, like this goes in. I'm assuming there's some sort of cavity in the skull, and then this skin just kind of gets stretched up and over. And then there's kind of like a skin attachment here. I'm gonna maybe pull this forward just a little bit. So it kind of looks like this, and it's in the sculpt here. So while we're using our standard brush, we have, I'm gonna turn lazy radius back on just to kind of smooth my stroke out. And I'm gonna give this a nice little, again, straight line here, just to kind of indicate that the skin in here is just kind of stretching up and over here. And then just, I don't want to go crazy and make that too noisy, but just, it looks like that's a pretty important part of this design. Here, this area looks like it needs to come up just a bit. So I'm going to kind of pull that up. And this is with my clay tubes brush. Actually, this is Magdalena's clay tubes brush. She'd had a Google ZBrush Master class, Magdalena. And she has her brushes on that live stream, and I think all it is like the clay tubes brush with a low intensity and then stroke modifiers, roll distance up to 5, although roll isn't turned on, so maybe not. I don't know if that really affects it, but anyway, lightly modified settings on those. And then yeah, so also another indication of just as things are next to each other, kind of integrating them. So going through here and maybe doing like a little wrinkle over at the head here, maybe a couple, just to kind of reinforce that. Maybe go in here with our inflate brush and just kind of fatten those up a little bit. Also, if it's giving you problems, it's like, this mesh is too dense. Remember, just go down in your subdivision levels and then try again with your different brushes. and then that might give you a little bit of a better handle on mushing these polygons around, which is essentially what we're doing. So back up to the highest, dam standard 02, and we'll start talking about skin direction. So usually what you would have is like at the corner of the eye, you'd have some radiating lines like this. And I'm just going to do this a little more exaggerated. And then the eye bag wrinkles that go back and forth, because as things open and close a lot, they're going to start making wrinkles in the usual areas. Same thing at the corners of the mouth and stuff. Again, I don't think we need to go too nuts with it. And also, this little stretch skin is kind of a prominent feature. And I guess I'm talking about stuff you can't really see, but I'm just looking at like this little stretched skin area. The wrinkles, you know, don't go across there and kind of break that form up. So I'm going to, again, I'm not going to do everything that I think I should do. I'm going to kind of pick and choose my battles, even if it feels a little weird. Oh yeah, and then also so this is what I was doing earlier and I forgot I was doing. So going through here with my move brush with topological turned on, I can move these lips closer together, because really it looks like, you know, they start to kind of come together through here, and even at other reference, you know, when his mouth is closed, it starts to pinch a little tighter in those corners. But it looks like I can kind of leave it mostly open. Now, as I'm over here with topological on, it's not going to touch those other areas, but as I get into these areas, the radius might start coming in. It's actually doing great, but if it doesn't, hit W, control drag down to mask along your topology here, and then you can just use masking to kind of, and then control tab to invert to overlap those. But hey, I think that worked fine. Okay, so now let's go back in here, and again, we're looking at maybe some skin imperfections and some little scaly areas on his head here. So again, go through here, and we're talking about skin direction. So we'll start with just making sure we have, I'm going to put in just some that's not going to interfere with this that much, although maybe lightly. I know I said I wasn't going to, and I don't want to fight it. I'm going to just kind of indicate across here. This is with my dam standard 02 brush, not crazy, and I can always go through and exaggerate it later if I want to, with contrast brushes, etc. I'm just going to go through here and maybe inflate, maybe with a little clay buildup, go through here and just kind of beef this up, and then come back in and just give little indications. Hey, you know what? Already I'm like, I want one more subdivision. Don't go poor detail, Mike. Just little indications. Although, now that I say that, I'm going to subdivide this one more time, just because if I'm going to bother putting this detail in, I don't want to have to go back in and make more unnecessary noise. I'm just going to go in here and just do a real light pass. So again, just little indications of skin direction around the eyeball, and then as it you know, goes down the cheek and around the mouth too. So down the cheek, we're going to add in just little indications of this, kind of like a leathery, he sits outside all day, I would assume, and, you know, gets weathered, and just like any tough mammal slash reptile that is, you know, kind of tough for the elements, they're going to have some kind of leathery skin, and on him in particular, or her, I don't know what kind of genders these things have necessarily, but we're gonna go, hey, here's our skin wrinkles radiating out, and it's kind of leathery skin, but over here it starts not cracking, but it starts turning into more of a lizard look. Now, skin direction is still going to affect where your lizard bumps are going to be, so we'll kind of use what we have here, but I also want to stay true to the reference. If I want to stay really true to the reference, I could go through here and paint. Should I? I can go through here and I can paint with my Polypaint and then match it exactly, or I can just kind of use it as just like, hey, just go a little more, make this a little smaller. Just go a little more scaly here. And so we're going to go big scaly in the middle, and then as we get closer to these areas, so we're going to give the illusion that, like, as the skin transitions here, you get these big knobby scales, and then as it goes closer to the more expressive parts of the face, we'll get a little smaller, and then eventually it'll just kind of transition into leathery skin. So that way we get both reads, and there's a natural transition between them. If I was a smart person, I would have reference up of exactly what I'm talking about, but no one ever accused me of being too smart, so I'm not going to do that. But definitely, if you're doing this at home, go get reference and I'll use it, because it'll help inform what's going to feel right. And also, even if it's a creature thing, and it's like, well, I can't get reference of him, he doesn't really exist, or it's a puppet. If you're making design decisions and you can base it into something that your audience can recognize, doesn't have to be, you don't have to beat them over the head with it, but just give them little indications of functionality that they've seen before. Again, even if it's just tickling the reptile part of their human brain recognition, it'll give them something to be like, oh, I understand what you're doing there visually and you're trying to message to me. And everybody's happy. Everybody feels good. Again, we'll just go through here. I'm going to exaggerate just a tiny bit this area just to kind of pop these things a little bit more. And now we have some visual interest in these areas. I don't want to overload him completely with noise, but something like that. Let me see, at the end of your stream, looking to take a concept or polybrush. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that polybrush table. Best bid to see. Yeah, we can check that out. Target polygon count, is that an add-on or ZRemesher feature? Nope, that's a ZRemesher feature. Sorry, I was using my custom brush for that, but if you go in here to Geometry ZRemesher, there is a ZRemesher. Where is it at? Adaptive size, smooth groups. Is there should, wait, what happened? ZRemesher, adaptive size, target polygon count. Oh, there it is. It's at the top. It was grayed out. Oh yeah, and then we were doing double same in half. So if you have a target count and it's like, ah, that's a little rich, sometimes I'll just say half, try it again, or I'll dial the target down a little bit. Cool. And then yeah, metahumans, LOD 0. And also you got to consider too, your LOD 0 for your character select screen, where it's just your character on the screen, can be a lot higher poly than what gets baked down in engine running around at third person view or whatever. You can get away with murder in that case. So yeah, you'll have an LOD 0 maybe, and then an LOD 1, which is drastically dropped down, baked down, merged, running around in game, and a lot more performance. So all kinds of tricks. Cool. All right, so moving right along. Some of this reference I'm getting has a little more detail than others, although there is like little knobs on here too. So I'm going to switch back to my standard brush. We do have an alpha on. I'm going to take my lazy radius, tap L to turn that off so I can go through here and just kind of make little dots here. Can I? Yeah. So I just kind of like just tap an area or kind of just lightly rub an area and get little knobs on here. Of course, you can just drag and drop an alpha. This actually is a little intense. I'm going to drop that down a little bit here. Also, you can use your clay brush for this. But yeah, there's like little skin imperfections, and also these also might tend to show up in here as well. Just little areas to kind of go through and make it. It's a leathery skin, and maybe also it's a little bit. Let's turn that alpha off. Maybe that's the problem here. Yeah. So we can go through here and we can add, just little imperfections along the leathery skin, and then also, any kind of lumps or knobs in here. You can also go back in here with your clay buildup or your clay brush and kind of exaggerate these. And the reason I'm using my clay buildup and clay brush, if I go in here with my standard brush, it tends to want to bleed out over my lines, whereas if I use my clay brush, and by lines I mean, the little areas in between, the little recessed areas. So go back in with your clay brush and you can kind of knob out some areas to kind of reinforce the idea that there's a scale here, and then as it transitions out you can kind of fade back into a leathery skin. So we'll continue that thought. We'll just go back in here with our damn standard O2 brush, and we'll just continue to kind of lightly feather in some skin direction. And so for the mouth is a good example. Let's go ahead and turn everything else back on here. We don't need to see the hair necessarily. There we go. So the transition here is a pretty severe one for the upper beak area. It's you can see a pretty pretty good line there, and in fact it looks like I'm it's fine, whatever. Pretty good line there. Same thing on the beak. There's some striations. So we could carve some of those in, but there's not a whole lot of lip wrinkle lines. So again, I'm going to be subtle with this. So I'm just going to give a little bit of leathery skin indication that, again, that kind of radiate out, and I guess just like human lips, I'm going to kind of make it, I should say, human lips if you got a lot of sun damage or you're a smoker. They'll start to do this pretty severe. I mean, anybody really, once you age, you'll start getting these lines, but especially pronounced in, like I said, kind of sun damaged or smoker skin. So around here, and then again, just kind of radiating out and crisscrossing over. And some of this stuff will just kind of be, you can go, like if you're going to 3D print this, you might want to exaggerate this and really have it stand out depending on your printing at scale. In our instance, just for renders, probably, I mean, you could still exaggerate it for rendering too. You can go through and really crank up the contrast between these crevices. They're in your texture map and stuff. I'll leave that up to you if you're following along. I don't know if any, you know what, I do get tweets sometimes where people actually do follow along and make their own stuff. So there might be, that might actually be a true statement. Okay, so we got skin direction, and I feel like we kind of went into skin direction really quickly when really we probably should be up-resing some other areas. But it's too much fun to work on the faces and heads, right? Same thing here, just kind of going out. And then here, we don't gotta go crazy, but he is a reptile monkey. So leathery skin for either one of those, but also, you know, the pebbly stuff for the reptile. Not terrible. And then I'm gonna exaggerate these again, just little bit of skin direction this away. And I'm doing it manually, one wrinkle at a time, as opposed to going in and doing like a leathery spray stroke, just because spraying will just kind of randomly rotate alphas around, and that's not really what I want. I want to make sure that these lines go kind of where I want them to, and then if I need to do just a big broad area that I really don't care about that much, then I'll go through and just kind of spray. At that point, you're basically just breaking up the surface more than sculpting, but I guess it's the same thing. You can just apply an alpha and just stamp it on there. You don't have to spray it, and then you can also get your wrinkle direction that way too. So okay, so this, and then the lips, and then we'll just, again, we'll kind of crisscross these areas over, finish the thought, go in and do little bump pass maybe, and we'll just get really subtle out here. Okay, so back to our standard brush here, go in and we'll put in some bumps. It looks like we'll vary the size of our bumps. We'll do some bigger bumps here, and also a little bit of storytelling too, like why would the bumps be bigger in this area, or if you've got some good reference that would indicate bump distribution. I'm saying bumps, I'm sure there's a real name for it, but yeah, just stuff to think about. And then also through here, you can go in and use a clay brush. You can go in and use a clay brush and exaggerate these areas too, and then you can also go into your contrast brush, which we'll do in just a second. I don't know what I touched there. So clay brush here. And speaking of, oh, you know what? I accidentally went up here and touched my undo slider. You can hide that, which might behoove us. That's why it paused there a minute. It's because I went from this point in history and then I went back 1,200 spots in history. There we go. If you want to, preferences, undo history, show undo selector. There we go. We'll get rid of it. We don't need it at this moment. Like I was saying, our clay brush here, we can go through and exaggerate some of this, or BC brush contrast delta or target. I'll do target, and you can go through here and you can just kind of rub an area and just beef up the contrast if you want to. But again, I want it to be pretty subtle, so I don't want to go too crazy with that, and that'll be a pass I do at the end probably. Okay, neck. This is where things start going from a little more sculpted down to a little more, there's like these little vascular kind of paper mache areas in here with the wrinkles. So, first, let's get our primary shapes going. I'm going to go ahead in this area, I'm going to go ahead and turn off X symmetry, which I should probably not have symmetry in face wrinkles either. That's kind of silly, but whatever. Not claiming to be an awesome role model for sculpting here. L, lazy radius on, and then we'll go ahead and just put in just a few major, they're kind of, honestly, they kind of read to wrinkles to me. Actually, we'll turn lazy mouse off, I think. That seems to be, I'm going to try to maintain a generally even stroke, but yeah, they kind of look like kind of radiating wrinkles more than anything else. I'm going to go back in with my damn standard 02 brush, and we'll just reinforce the underside of these so it looks like they're hanging down a little bit, and then go back in on the top with just a regular old clay brush, and I'll just smooth that transition out just a bit. So now we got a little bit of hanging flash. Now, speaking of wrinkles, and we talked about this in part 1, if we go in here to BCK, for example, your cloth hook brush, right now we're at 7 million. So if we look at our dynamics, or it caps out at like 500,000, I think. So it wouldn't work. You can just go through here. It'll just act as like a move brush, kind of a spiral brush it looks like. However, I can go lower in my subdivision history. So now there's 1.785. Now subdivision level 2, whole body subdivision level 2. Now we're starting to get claw simulation, which is fine. If you want to go in here and say do a thick skin, turn that on. We're going to make the influence of how much this brush can affect our surface at a certain distance. So now I can go through here and just kind of push wrinkles across my surface and enforce them like that. And you don't even have to do it with cloth hook, which is a little much. You can go in here just with your move brush. Just make sure you go in here to elasticity and crank your simulation durations up, and then you can use your move brush to go through and oops. We also have to turn on off auto masking, topological. Now you can go in here with just your move brush, and it will, you're like pushing geometry across a surface. Huh. A little slow there. Now, if you were like, that's great, but I want to have more fidelity while I'm doing this, you can go up in your subdivision history and then just narrow it down. So I was like, okay, I'm over my point count now, but I can just take this little spot here, and now I'm under my point count. So now I can go through here and use this to kind of go through and kind of push wrinkles around. You can also use like your pinch brush. I like to use simulation iterations up on your pinch brush, and then you can just go pinch geometry while it simulates. While it's simulating, it is looking at anything you have in here. I don't know that it's really simulating gravity, but we can go ahead and turn that off. But if you want to inflate or expand while you're using these brushes, just have those on and turned up, and it will certainly do that. So again, move brush, did we leave elasticity on? Yeah, I'll need to remember to turn that off because I don't always want to have that on. We're just going to go through here with our move brush using the wrinkles that we have and just kind of exaggerate those just a bit. Give it more of that look, I should say. And then again, just kind of going through here on my reference, just kind of picking and choosing like kind of strong reeds, strong wrinkle reeds. They kind of go across the forms here. And they're a little, the patterns they make across the surface are interesting. Also put it that way. So I might deviate just a tiny, tiny bit. Just to kind of, again, some of them kind of looks like veins, and then some of them kind of look like wrinkles. I don't want to confuse. I want to be explicit with like, hey, this is a wrinkle, so you should read it this way. It's not just a massive vascular vein going across, but it's also kind of in the design of the character, so I kind of want to put that in. The dilemmas. We'll go ahead and just put it in as is. So I'm gonna treat these as more wrinkly than vascular, but if you read them as kind of vascular, that's okay, because I kind of read as veins a little bit too. So again, we're just going through here and just adding in a little bit of wrinkle breakup, and we can also go back in here to reinforce any of these with our Dam Standard brush. Not Dam Standard 02, but Dam Standard brush is a little meatier. You can make your brush a little smaller, and we'll just go through and again just reinforce these wrinkle directions like so, and then pull this up here, and then going back down over the forms with a little more of a standard brush wrinkle. But again, I'm gonna deviate just slightly and have these kind of radiate. Hold down Alt to dig in, let go of Alt to pull up. You know, brush basics here. And again, we're going to go back in and push the stuff around to really reinforce the wrinkle idea. But for now, just kind of heavy-handedly going through, and we'll go ahead and pull this wrinkle up over, and then this wrinkle will go underneath. Maybe kind of just overlap them like so. Yoink. Alrighty. And then standard brush. And we'll do our little... Actually, what I've got here I think will work. So I'm going to go back into my move brush. We're just going to isolate a little neck area here. And then again, we'll turn off thick skin. Or you know what? Pinch brush. Yeah. Just a little bit of pinch. And again, if I want this geometry to kind of expand as I'm pinching, I can go through and add that to my dynamic properties, but I think it's working okay. Now I am pulling these things closer together, which may not be what I want, so I might have to go move them apart, but it's not moving them that much, so I think I can actually live with just using the pinch brush. And even this right here is kind of what I'm seeing in the reference, where it's got like a broad surface and then it just kind of pinches. So this might be the brush to kind of get that Salacious B crumb, call it the Salacious wrinkle brush. So again, we already determined, just giving little indications of where I want my skin direction to go, and then we just go back in with our pinch brush and just get them wrinkles, and maybe even give it leeway to kind of just create its own, because it's kind of what I'm seeing in the reference is, you know, just these little wrinkles popping up, especially in these underneath areas. So I might just let it go ham under here. Whatever it feels like it needs to do, seems like it's doing the trick. And then maybe a little smooth pass in here. All right, wrinkly, kind of paper mache-ish, kind of vascular, veiny. And it looks like these damn standard wrinkles are a little too sharp still, so I'm gonna knock those back and then come back in. And this is where it gets real Bob Rossy. You know, just put in your friendly little wrinkles, a little bit slower pace. And this is where you zone out. So put on your favorite, what have I been listening to lately? Really weird stuff. Silent Hill soundtracks. Okay. Okay, going back up. Yeah, a really distinct laugh on this one. Okay, sorry, I missed a bunch of comments here. Yeah, retable poly count. Yeah. This is the character that turned me off from Star Wars after seeing him in Talk His BS besides job I backed out. He's an acquired taste. I don't know. I got a little I don't know why he tickled me just right. Maybe this is a really annoying laugh, but I'm a Salacious fan now. But I can see where you're coming from. There's between clay and clay buildup. They're both part of, so if we go in here to our clay brush, if you hover over any of these brushes, you see the base type is clay. So if we go in here to like clay tubes, it's also a clay base brush and then clay buildup. So BCB, clay buildup is also a clay type. So it's the same type of brush, it just has different settings built in underneath. Maybe stroke might be some stuff, or obviously your brush settings. So what you can do is if you want to kind of investigate, we can go here to like, okay, here's our clay brush. So if you go in here to like, not surface, but modifiers, and then samples is a good one to have open. So here's clay brush and here's clay tubes, for example. And then as you switch between those with your hotkeys, see what changes. So for example, the clay brush, the brush modifier is at 10. The clay tubes, the brush modifier is at 0. Constant tilt, that stays the same. So you can kind of just go back and forth and see what changed between the two brushes. Because off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what's different. But 5 a.m. random. Yes. So this is going to be a 2-hour live stream. I'm going to wrap it up in about 45 minutes. But Dynamesh tries to fill thin cuts I made on a model I just prevent. I was using creases and live booleans to make them. So thin little cuts. Oh yeah. So if you wanted to do something like, let's go ahead and do a quick save. Nope. Quick save. If you have a sphere, make Polymesh 3D here, and we'll go ahead and say Control D a couple times. So are you talking something like this, where, oops, unmask, clip curve, move brush, or actually pinch brush with simulation iterations off. So if you have a thin cut on here, and then you try to go through and, like we were talking about before, dynameshing this, it'll kind of start to close that stuff up. Thank you. Unfortunately, within whatever resolution threshold, it's going to try to close these up. So you can either crank up the resolution, and that'll give it enough resolution to where any thin areas that are close together won't stick, or what I might do is kind of what we did here, which is ZRemesh it. You sculpt it out with Dynamesh best you can, and then go in and smooth out any overlapping areas, move it out, ZRemesh it, and then project your details back, and then come back in and make those closer together. Alternatively, if you want to use it, we talked about this a little bit too. Sculptris Pro won't. This Sculptris won't do that. So if you do go in here to Sculptris, it will keep these areas separate. For example, we say delete lower. Sculptris. Yeah, so as you can see, as I'm using Sculptris Pro, it'll keep it separate. I'm actually pinching with Sculptris Pro, and it's not sticking anything together, but Dynamesh will. So I don't know what your workflow is, but anyway, that didn't really answer your question, but workarounds, I guess. But yeah, like Garrett says, increase. Yeah, and like he says there, ton of image substance. Thank you. Much better work in ZRemesh using a mouse compared to a tablet. 80% mouse, 20% tablet. Is that the thing only with me? I think that's only you. Or maybe it's only me. My ratios are the opposite. I'll use, in fact, I use my tablet for Max Maya Moto, Blender, Cinema 4D too. A lot of times, just because it's a little easier on my wrist. Ooh, let me copy that. Toshifumi Hinata. I'll check that out. Yeah, just something to keep my brain focused-ish. Clay buildup is good. Quicker way to blur a mask to maximum blurriness other than hitting blur mask multiple times. Yeah, that's a tough one. Unfortunately, like if you go in here with mask pin and you have a high resolution mesh or a really high resolution Dynamesh, you know, if I go here to subject level 5, for example, mask, and then, you know, again, control tap to blur, blur, blur. You can, so control tap to blur. You can also go in here and hit blur mask over and over again. I don't know how to get the maximum blurry. Now, one thing you can do if you do have subdivision history, the easy way is to go, hey, go to subdivision level 3, mask, and then you can blur it a lot faster. But that's not always an option. So unfortunately, I don't know. Now, I will say there is this trick. If you go in here to mask lasso, if you mask lasso here, it's a pretty sharp fall off here. Let's do it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to mask lasso through his arm really close. It's pretty sharp. However, if you back your camera off, the further back you go, the blurrier it's going to be. So when you do this, you'll get a very soft fall off. That's just with mask lasso. Yeah. Trying to think. One thing if you really get stuck, no, that's not going to work either because you'd have to have UVs. Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for that. I wish I had better answers to your questions. I'm sorry. Yeah, you know, you could maybe, yeah, run a macro hotkey that would spam it. It might be a slow operation depending on your resolution, but okay. Body. Head is about as done as I want to get it. Let's go in and let's go through the ears. Let me look at these ears real quick in my reference. See, I'm missing anything, but very thin. You can start seeing some veins in there that might be fun to get in. So same deal. We'll go through here really quickly. Also, this is a very thin mesh. So we've talked about this a lot actually, but if we go in here like our clay tubes or clay buildup or building up through and we say, hey, control drag to Dynamesh and it makes those holes, it's because it's sucking in the other side. It's making a very, very thin mesh that Dynamesh has a hard time resolving. So if you're using any of this stuff, backface masking, auto masking, backface masking turned on. Now it's brush specific, so I go to my standard brush, it turns off. So that's why in my interface I have a hotkey for it. I can turn it on and off for any brush. Alt F is turning on backface masking, and I don't even have to have this open. I have it in my interface. So when I go to my standard brush and I want my backface masking on, I'll do Alt F. I don't actually touch the button. I'll use my hotkey. This is just a visual indicator that it's on or off. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think so. So I'm also going to turn on my lazy radius because again, you just want not crazy smooth strokes. You can always crank up your stroke, lazy mouse, lazy radius. If you want to make like really very long smooth strokes, but in this case we just need it on just a little bit just so I don't get the dotting effect. And then again, once it gets in here, it looks like it gets a little more wrinkly, so we'll just go ahead and pump up the jam a little bit as it transitions out here to, you know, thick leathery skin. And on the back, I don't really have any good reference for the back. I'm gonna make it look a little different. You know, the inside of the ear is probably gonna look a little more fragile. Is that the right word? I don't know, a little more unprotected. And then the back here, I'll probably be more weathered, and so I'm not going to put in a bunch of crazy detail. Maybe down here towards the bottom, I'll just kind of indicate where it gets really thin. We'll put some, I don't know, kind of wrinkles, kind of vascular kind of veins. Also, same thing with your smooth brush. Go in here and turn on backface masking for your smooth brush, because you don't want to be smoothing back here with a big smooth brush. I'll show you. Hey, I want to smooth these out. You smooth it out, and then you go to the other side and it's all smooth too. Although that seemed to work fine. Oh, I forgot to turn on. It was hold down shift and I'll turn on backface masking. So anyway, leave it alone. Leave the other side alone. And then again, go back in here with our pinch brush. Oh, I forgot to turn on X symmetry. That's fine. I wonder if there's a way. Actually, there's a tricky way we could do this. Okay, so I'm going to go through here and oops. We're going to go in here to select lasso. We're going to narrow down our geometry and we'll go down. You know what? Here's the other thing too. If we're on subdivision level 5, even if we can technically use our dynamics, that'd be 250. Yeah, that should work. Let me see. Oh, I turned it off. Stupid. There we go. Sorry. So even if I am at subdivision level 5 and I am under the point count to where I can go and use this, the wrinkles are way too small, I can go in here to dynamics and crank that firmness up, but it might introduce some noise, although that does work pretty good for that kind of weird sitting on the surface wrinkles. But also remember, you can also just dump down to a lower subdivision level with less geometry so that while you're using a firmness of 2, it's only picking up, you know, this level of changes or this level of detail, because there's not that much geometry. So something, just 2 different ways to kind of work through that problem. Okay. Now let's say, I forgot to turn on X symmetry. I don't want symmetry through here, so I can't just do a smart mask mirror. What would it called? It's under deformation. You can, if you have subdivision history, or even if you don't, well, no, you need symmetrical object. You can go through here and mask the half you want to keep, and then you can go over here and say smart resim across the x-axis. However, I want to keep the neck not simulated, unsymmetrical, non-symmetrical. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to duplicate this body off. I'm going to say, go to subdivision level 5, delete lower. I'm going to say mirror across the x-axis. That puts all this information over here. And I'm going to say, oops, we turned this off, didn't we? Preferences, timeline, undo selector. Control tap this point in history to store these points. And then I'll go back to my body. I'm going to go into solo mode so you don't get confused. BHR, our history recall brush, or again, our X symmetry is turned off. Let's go up here to subdivision level 5. And now I think, and also maybe backface masking just in case, now I can go through here and again, just change your camera as you're going, and I'm just going to project those details back to this side too. Now granted, it wouldn't have taken that long to go through and just do some bespoke wrinkles, and it'd probably be better if you can afford it, if you don't have to bake a map with symmetry. If you're doing way old school, keep it symmetrical and then just pick and choose where your midline is. It's been a while since I've had to do that, now that I say that out loud. So if you did have to keep things symmetrical, this would be a way to do it. And you can see that I had a little bit of an issue here. It's starting to shear that geometry, so just be very careful with your camera direction. So hey, we got our wrinkles on that side. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on X symmetry now, and then we'll go back here. We don't need this anymore, so we'll delete it. Now it is still going to store those points in history. You can see that little red mark. That means there's another subtool that has history stored. It's just letting you know. If you want to get rid of that, just control tap the latest point in history here and then control tap it again. Okay. Body. How are we doing on time? Oh, I got plenty of time. Unfortunately, or fortunately, more of the same on the body. Let me see, we got some good reference here. Again, kind of just more of the same, like I was saying. Wrinkles, kind of the paper mache wrinkle look. Yeah, so we'll just continue forward, same old. And then it gets really wrinkly. Ooh, I got some good hand reference here. Really wrinkly around the hands and the feet, where it kind of pools. There, yeah. So as it gets here, yeah, you can kind of see. You see what I'm talking about. So, also it looks like those nails are really thick. I have like little thin nails here, so I'm actually going to go through and do an inflate on these, because those are hooks. Same thing for those toes. Alt tap, inflate. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Okay, body here. So we're going to go through. We're going to do, again, our major wrinkles. His body is generally smooth, except for like we're talking about a few major wrinkles. So if you want to go through and do a skin direction pass, you can, because just like the face, the body also has weathering, and then repetitive bending is going to leave similar skin direction things, especially on the knuckles here. You'll get those big, yeah, looks like it has that there too. So yeah, the big wrinkles along here. Same thing. That's why you got some loose skin over here, and then it wrinkles up, because your body has to be allowed to move, so let it. Your skin has to allow it. And then on the other side here, maybe we'll switch over to the damn standard brush and just put a more robust. It does have an interesting, actually, this, yeah, there's not even really a joint there. I just kind of indicated one, but I'll leave it. And then, yeah, the wrinkles, this wouldn't really be like a hand wrinkle necessarily, but again, I don't want to telegraph that he's super humanoid, but I also, again, want to give the audience something to latch on to that makes sense to them. So if you were so inclined, if you look at your hand, your knuckles, again, not a whole lot of knuckle action going on here, but if you want to indicate a little more knuckles up here in the wrinkle, and then also it's on this side, it's a little more webbed. So you can go through here and pull this geometry on the underside down. You only got one thing here, and then that way, from the top, when you're looking down at your hand, the knuckles are up here, and then the corners of your hand are a little further down. Again, not totally necessary, but just little things you can add. And again, these are just kind of very skin directioning. And then we're gonna have some big looping, crisscrossing. This is almost like cloth. So we're gonna drop down to subject level 3 maybe. I was gonna put some really heavy Z and Y shapes. Again, it's kind of like a compressed cloth here. Another thing you could do, if you're so inclined, if you want compression, is you can go through here and you can grab, you know, if you want to mask this area, again, Control Tap to blur it out like we were talking about, BTC, Transpose Cloth, and then you can go through here and as you, let's turn on LSIM. Oh, actually we can't use mask, we got to use visibility to get rid of some of the polygons. There we go. BTC, Transpose Cloth, you can go through here and just do that, and that'll just give you those compression wrinkles we were talking about. Of course, if that's too compressed, again, go in here and change your firmness or drop down your resolution, and that'll allow you to kind of go through and just get some really quick compression wrinkles if you need them. We don't need them that much. We want to control them a little bit more, but food for thought. Here. Oh, LSIM dynamic was turned on. Sorry. That's fine. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Wrinkles here, and then along the sides here. So again, just kind of making those Y and N shapes here and having those just kind of branch out from each other, and then go back in here with your pinch brush and isolate and okay, we can always go in there with our contrast brushes and stuff like that too, and make sure that they're a popping as much as we want them to. Let's go up one more. Yeah, these ones I want to keep more knuckly. Anyway, you get the idea. Do a bunch of that type of stuff. We'll keep moving along. Again, just little indications of wrinkles and compression, because he's got like really super loose leathery skin in some interesting areas along the elbow here probably. I don't have great reference along the back, but I'm just making some educated guesses. And again, just telegraphing the idea visually that this is what we want to have happen in here. We want to get across the idea that there's some really loose, compressed skin stuff happening on our little Star Wars guy. And again, go back in here. Such a level 4 is fine. And then just reinforcing that with a little back of the leg. And the legs, it looks like it does, yeah, you know what it is? Just like anything else, I'm going to put a little bit of indications of, standard brush, little indications of some vascular, some veins that make sense to me. And then when we get into heavy wrinkle areas, that'll just be wrinkly stuff. So we can have the best of both worlds, like through here, along the back of the arm, maybe just little hints of vascular stuff going on. Around the extensors and the flexors, we'll just dial in. And if you want to get really into it, you know, you can go look at actual vein patterns. But again, it's not a human, so we'll call it artistic license. That'll be our excuse. and then we'll put some wrinkles over top of those. And like I said, we're being pretty subtle, but now you know. I mean, you probably already did know, but contrast brushes are your friend. You can also use proxy pose, which we'll get into in just a second, to go through and do some really cool stuff. Let's go through and do our big wrinkle pass here. And again, a little bit of skin direction too, never hurt. Big wrinkle pass here. Sorry, this is where I probably should have for my channel some real nice music to listen to, so I don't feel the need to fill the dead air. I can just sculpt for hours and you guys can leave because it's boring to watch. So skin direction, and then coming in with heavier wrinkles. Skin direction, wrinkles, skin direction, wrinkles, indicating functionality and material. Because again, if you make the wrinkles too small, this starts looking like silk. Make them too big, looks like canvas, you know, so just kind of dialing in what makes sense for your character. And also not getting too cut up like we were earlier. We were talking about anatomy and stuff. Just knock it back. There's skin, there's fat, especially thick leathery skin is going to really obfuscate your underlying anatomy and stuff like that too. You don't want to make everything look like Bruce Lee, super ripped. BCK cloth hook. Let's go down to level 3. Isolate thin skin. I think thin skin, thick skin will work. With, I don't really remember. Oof, maybe a little bit lower even. Really, I'm just trying to get these things to overlap each other, but really it might be an area where pinch brush to the rescue. Although I want to go a little higher res on this one because I want that wrinkle to really be down here. And then maybe a little damn standard 02, and maybe a little smooth, and then maybe a little damn standard 02 at a higher resolution. And we'll just continue. Now on the back, again, I don't really have great back reference. So you know what? Like I said, if you have good front reference, you can interpolate or extrapolate to the back. Just make good judgment. So we'll just continue this here. And I tend to put the more sensitive skin up front, and then as we go to the back, again, just kind of going into a little more leathery, a little more pebbly transition. It just feels right, right? If an animal's going to hunch over and protect itself, it's going to put its back to the world. And it might be a little heavier, a little more armored, tiny bit. Around here. And we are kind of leaning into the leathery aspect of it, which again fits into both the monkey and kind of the reptile part. The shoulders, I also tend to like put a little more scaly skin on the shoulders, or a little heavier leathery areas, shoulders and back. So if we just want to exaggerate the shoulder area, you know, use your little contrast brush if you want, and you can also just go through back of the arms a little heavier. Although now it's looking very like the same thing I would do for a Rancor, but we'll a little bit lighter than a Rancor. Go through with our standard brush, and again turn off lazy radius by tapping L. And we'll just go through and we'll just put in like some knobbier skin here, some bigger dots. And the storytelling too is important, so if you're going to be putting dots somewhere, try and come up with a reason why they would have them. And then again, just not crazy, but just start dialing in with our damn standard 02. Maybe bringing back some of that reptile scale motif from around the eyes, just to have it somewhere else on his body in an area that kind of makes sense. Maybe, why not? Again, big, thicker skin on the back of the neck, in the back and the shoulders. Because I don't want the reptile skin to just be around his eye and that's it, it makes sense that it would show up in other areas too, I think. So, and again, I don't have a ton of back reference, so I'm just going to assume I can continue that thought. And again, I'm not going to go like crocodile skin or anything with it. So we'll just kind of go through, transition from leathery to pebbly. Same thing for the shoulders, a little bit, just a tiny, tiny taste. And you'll notice my brush size, and let's actually go to Southern Level 5 for this area. You'll notice my brush size is pretty large compared to what I'm working on. That's just kind of how this brush works. Kind of crank it up a bit. So now, we probably should detail out the feet. Sorry, the detailing goes pretty fast. I don't want you to get the impression that like this is, it's not even that tedious. It's just trying to go fast because I want to cover more cool things for posing and poly painting and stuff like that. So I'm gonna rush through this just a bit, but yeah, I'll get the drill. It's you know, big compression shapes. Let's knock this down just a bit to make it a little easier to work on. Our big X, Y, and Z shapes for our big compression wrinkles on the top of the feet, it looks like. And I don't see the back of the feet, but we'll put some there too. Just a big loose skin here, and then compression along the top. And then a little help. Especially around here, yeah. All right, all right. Oh, I did get coffee. Oh, I should probably catch up too. Deal with having a project all organized, pure rough, spending time thinking about it, and when you sit down to do it, you don't feel motivated. You get discouraged in the middle of blocking. Yeah, totally, right? You got to push through that ugly baby phase, and the really crappy part, like he's starting to look okay now, but for a long time, like in fact, I would say most of part one, if not all of part one, tough to look at. Not real good. Just the idea, the volumes are there-ish, the idea is there-ish. Then you just got to go through and just try to get in the zone, or try to ignore. It's a little harder to ignore when you're live streaming because you're just sitting there staring at it while you're assuming that everybody's judging you and what you're making. That might just be me thing though. But if you can, to push through that ugly baby phase, just keep moving. Just keep moving and keep looking at reference and bouncing back and forth, and just don't think too hard about what the final process is and how disappointed in yourself you are, but think more about just execution. I'm just going to this section, I'm looking at this, I'm going to execute. I'm not going to get caught up in, you know, taking a step back and be like, oh, it's becoming beautiful. It's like, don't worry about that. Look, execute, focus on that, and get out of your head a little bit, and then it might be a little easier to... Actually, one thing we need to do here too, I'm going to put these beaks, yeah, I won't. So here's another instance of, hey, I need to start going final on here. I'm not going to make any major changes, so I do like to have UVs and lower res mesh proxy meshes to bake to, just in case I need it. So control tap these points in history, X symmetry is turned on, ZRemesh depth size down quite a bit, target polygon count of 5 is fine, and then we'll just ZRemesh, and you know, I think we can do better than that, ZRemesh half. Now while we're dropping down, we're moving these verts further and further away from our original points. Original points. So I'm just going to project history as I go. I think, let's do one more. Okay, and then, oh, one thing I forgot to mention, if you hold down Alt and ZRemesh, it'll give you a different midline algorithm. I don't know if that's useful to you or not, but so again, project history, Control D to subdivide, project history, Control D to subdivide, project history. We didn't have a ton of detail on here, so that's about all I had. Just looking at the reference here, again, just some real quick. I could spend I can spend 5 more days on this character. I could spend another hour on this character. Kind of depends on what it's going to be used for, where it's going to be seen from. If I'm just going to be doing renders from back here, then I'm done, right? But if I'm doing close-up IMAX full face renders, maybe not. So Control tap again, and then ZRemesh, same settings-ish, X symmetry turned on, obviously. And then half, project history, maybe half. Yeah, project history, Control D to subdivide, project history, Control D to subdivide, project history. And then damn standard 02. The bottom beak doesn't have quite the striations that the top one does. In fact, some of these don't have any at all. I'll put a little. I'll put a few just to kind of, again, carry that thought down to the bottom here. And then one more time, I'm just going to go back in here with my standard brush with lazy mouse on. Just tap L on your keyboard, and I'm going to give them some of these ridges, because it looks like, you know, just to kind of reinforce that hard beak look. And I'll knock this back a little bit, sharpen these up just a bit. So we'll pull out, just run our standard brush down here, and then hold down Alt and pull in, and that'll just give us a little sharper ridge. And in fact, if I want to work on this separately, I can, because it's a separate mesh, so I can just go right in here and, you know, just kind of give them a little bit of a roof to the mouth here. Also, you can go in here with your pinch brush, and in this case, I might turn off Spotlight. Nope, I might turn off Simulation Iterations. So I can just go through here and literally just pinch that down to a little more of a crusty beak. And then from the side here, I like to use my move brush with AccuCurve turned on. I have a special brush for that. That just allows me to pull to points as opposed to kind of a rounded shape. Now I don't need to, in this case maybe not, because it's not like he has really hard super pointy beak. In fact, if I want to tame this down a little bit, I can go back in with my, for example, my trim dynamic brush and just kind of get, you know, flatten some of these surfaces where I think I'm getting a little too far away from the feel I want. But again, also BSH, your snake hook brush, you can go through here and you can use that as a move brush alternative. It'll give you a little more oomph, if that makes sense, the scientific term. Let's hit Control D one more time here. Yeah, fine. Yeah, fine. And okay, let's say close enough. You know what? So last time we talked about making hair cards. So if you want to see the process of this, essentially the only thing I did past that point, you can kind of see it's a little bit more broken up. I went through and repainted my polyplane here. So here's my texture off, hair cards. Here's my texture on. It's just pure black here, so I can use transparency on here with anti-alias to get rid of the other areas of this. And then I went through and just painted with my standard brush hair strandy looking things, and that's what's going through the mesh here. Now, I can also just use Fibermesh, and if we're just doing it for a render, that's totally fine. So for this, I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick save as, and then say, we'll call this our Salacious 07. And then, oh, stretch. Wait for it to kick in, jeez. Sorry, slow hard drive problem. And then I'm gonna go ahead and delete this hair. So let's talk about really quick polypaint. So for the body, I'm gonna bring in, do I have good reference I wanna sample from that's not too processed? I think that's my best bet. I'm gonna bring in some reference. I'm gonna go Control tap this point in history, Control tap it again to get rid of any stored points, don't need them anymore. Go out of edit mode, say always switch. I always like to do a quick save just to get everything saved when I'm switching out. Go in here to our plane 3D, go into edit mode, texture, import. I'm gonna grab something I can sample color from. So reference, trying to find, there's a good example. So grab that, texture, select the texture. Oh, actually, you don't even need to do this, sorry. Ignore that. With our plane primitive selected, go in here to texture map, put the texture on there. Now, if the texture is perfectly square, great. If it's a different ratio, go to Polypaint, hold down Shift, and then say Polypaint from texture, and that'll change the ratio of your plane to match the ratio of your image. So then we can turn off colorize for Polypaint, turn texture back on. Let's go in here to flat color, and we'll rotate this around, and I'm going to put this over here, and then we're going to say go out of edit mode. That's going to drop it to our canvas. We're going to go back to what we're working on here, drag them out on our canvas, go into edit mode. We'll switch to Skin Shader 4, and then we'll just go through and start poly painting. So really quickly, just to run in like a base color, I'm going to say I'm going to tap C, which is going to sample. You can also drag from your RGB and then sample over here, but you can also just tap C and then Control Alt F to fill. I'll tap C here, and I'm just going to go, oops, sorry. The body is what I want to fill with this kind of just a mid-tone, maybe a little darker than that. Yeah. So fill, and then Alt tap here, and then fill, a little darker. And then Alt tap here and fill. And then for the eyes here, let's go ahead and say, this one's gonna be a little bit different. I'm gonna sample, and then I'm gonna make it a little more saturated, a little more orange, and a lot more saturated. It's eyeballs. Let's go nuts. So maybe a little more yellow. Okay, so we're gonna fill, nope, Alt tap the eyeball, fill it. We do have, on this, in this instance, we do have toy plastic. Just go in here to M, fill object, and that'll fill that with toy plastic. In fact, we'll switch that to RGB. Fill 100% with this color. I have a hotkey set to color fill object, Control Alt F, and then, I might fake this a little bit. So I'm gonna go over here to my oranges, and maybe a little brighter. And then we're gonna say turn off lazy mouse, Z add off, and RGB intensity down. And we're gonna paint just a little bit. We're gonna go a little more intense with our orange in here, and then maybe a little darker along the top, and then maybe a little lighter along the bottom. And then we're gonna go through here, hold down Control, we're gonna mask circle. Here, Control tap to invert that. I'm gonna Control tap just to blur that just a tiny, tiny bit. And then again, we'll sample. This is probably just pretty dark, right? And then Control Alt F, and there we go. We've got, and again, in the reference, it looks like it is, there's not really a ring around here, but it kind of bothers me. It kind of feels a little weird. Maybe we'll take this head and we'll scooch this up just a bit. Or maybe we'll go along. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Don't worry about it. So we've got our base body here, and now I'm just gonna start going in and painting. If you just wanna do base colors, I'm just kind of looking at this. So we have our kind of base in here. I'm gonna go through and do a little bit of a magenta, like a darkish magenta pass. Standard brush, body selected. Alpha off. I might go into, that's fine. So again, just speaking of a little bit of color breakup, and actually this will probably go in at the end too. Sorry, I'm speaking in riddles here. Another area I want to fix, not fix, but I'm actually going to go in here really quickly just to exaggerate the mouth cavity area. Let's go ahead and turn on backface masking. I'm going to darken this up. Not totally necessary or realistic necessarily, but it's just, it helps. All right. And then C, you can also sample from your own object if you want to go back to your base color. Okay, let's go a little darker, maybe. We'll start darker. So I'm going to sample from this area here, and we're going to grab a little bit of a darker orange, a little more saturated here. And I'm just going to kind of rub some darker orange areas that I'm looking at. And again, I am using perhaps unwisely symmetry. That's okay. And then we'll make it a little bit lighter too. So I'm going to sample from this. And again, I'm just going to tweak just a tiny bit over. Okay. So again, I'm kind of doing a little bit of an airbrushy look just to kind of match the reference here. So in these big lines through here, I'm just going to kind of go through like I'm taking an airbrush and just punching in these shapes. Wherever the wrinkles are, we're gonna let this kind of go through here. Now don't worry, I can go back through and darken the crevices in there. It's totally doable. I'm just going through and doing kind of a ham-fisted, heavy-handed job here. Now one thing too, I don't see it on here that much, but something you can do is go through here, say like with your drag rect and maybe this alpha 22, you can go through here and just do a lot of mottling just to kind of break up the surface, and as you're going through and building up layers, giving yourself just little indications of underlying body functionality, you know, little blues, little magentas. Again, I don't think it's totally necessary on this guy, but if we're so inclined, yeah, we can do it. Again, just kind of break up the surface. And you can do spray strokes, you can do different alpha patterns. Knock yourself out. I'll do it a little bit here. I mean, I'm keeping them relatively subtle. I'm not going too nuts. And again, this goes into storytelling too. So while you're doing modeling and you're looking at your reference, pick areas that or colors that make sense. I'm just kind of doing it haphazardly, just as a surface breakup exercise, but be better than me. So C sample, and now as we're starting to build up our layers, the modeling aspect will kind of fade. Oops, swap this out. It'll kind of start to fade, but it'll still linger there just enough. Let's crank up our RGB intensity just a tiny bit here. And again, I'm being a little heavy-handed as to kind of exaggerate just kind of what I see in the reference, is just over-exaggerating the airbrushy wrinkles a bit, where the bone kind of protrudes through the flesh, kind of exaggerating that relationship just a bit. And we're going to soften all of this detail and blend it all together. So that's why I'm saying exaggerate, 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 because we're going to knock it back in a second, or as we continue forward. Also, yeah, back face masking's on. So yeah, we'll knock this back, and then on the back here again, exaggerate from these little spines here out. And we are getting very samey, so try and, in your reference, try and see if there's any areas where it needs to go a little darker and a little more red maybe, or a little brighter and a little less saturated or more saturated. And that'll just, again, just kind of, the nuance of that will help a little bit. I'm going to go out of X symmetry here and just exaggerate. Again, just go in here with my airbrush and try and get that airbrushed kind of feel. And then we'll go back in and we'll do a cavity pass and see if we can't get that to feel good. So yeah, just picking up these highlights. And again, this is a mid pass. This is like, we're still kind of darker and more saturated. We're going to go a little lighter and a little less saturated as we start going over the final skin tone, because these, obviously right there, you're looking at it. He's a little brighter. So again, just picking up these highlights here, being a little heavy-handed. Perfect. I mean, not perfect, but good enough. Just burn through that ugly baby phase. And there are some projects and instances where it just stays ugly baby, and you just have to live with an ugly baby. You still love them in their own way, but it is what it is for some projects. And and you can always go back and revisit it too. So once you've done something, definitely consider being like, hey, you know what? I'm not really feeling that one, and I kind of don't have time or the energy to kind of finish this out. But keep it around. You never know. I mean, whenever new technology comes out, or you learn a new skill, and you want to, you know, say you get into rigging and animation, you're like, oh, I wish I would have kept those characters around because I could go into a quick update pass because I've learned a little more in ZBrush, and now I can do this kind of tool, and then I can get my little guy to dance around. But if you don't save your files, you'll forever miss out. Again, little heavy-handed on the airbrushing of these wrinkles here, and then we'll do a unification pass soon. Another thing to consider too is where the blood kind of pools on the body, and then where the bones come to the surface, it's going to look a certain way. Again, I'm just moving fast because we got to get into posing real quick, and I'm also going to make a really quick tree. So again, I'm pushing it, just trying to highlight and airbrush the major areas here. Okay, so now speaking of like where blood pools and stuff, as we're starting to go and continue this, if you want to get a little more skin detail as you're doing this, you can try to switch over to like an alpha 23, and then, you know, we'll go in here and like sample like this brighter tone here. It's a little less saturated, a little more yellow, a little brighter. And now as you're starting to do a unification pass with this alpha, it'll put a little bit of pebbly into the texture. And as you're kind of scratching along the surface, it will, again, that mottling that we put in is just going to keep pushing it further and further back. It's still there, it's still subtle, it's still a feel more than a see. And also while we're doing this, see how this is really golden, and then this is kind of magenta and reds. This is a little bluer. That's how you would paint a face too. So we'll say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna swing it over here into the goldens while I'm doing this, and then when I hit this area, it looks like golden comes through a little bit here, and then through the blood pooling areas of your face, the hot orifice areas of your face, we're going to go through here and just push this more into the reds, or maybe even into the magentas a little bit. So we'll get those nice reads through here, around the lips, it looks like, around the beak. All of this area gets a little more reddy. And then down here underneath gets a little cooler, so we'll swing this back around. You don't have, you don't have to go crazy. You can just, little indications go a long way. So just a little cooler along here. And of course there is still some mixed, looks like some mixed magenta, some reds in there too. So just paying attention, trying to anyway. The ears, we put some orange, dark oranges in there. We can probably do a little bit of blood pooling in there, and then we'll swing back around to the oranges and just continue to kind of light that up. Okay, so now same for the body. Let's do a really quick, just like blood pooling pass, maybe along the pecs here, little belly, back of the wrist, in the armpit, back of the knee, front of the foot, in between the toes. And then we'll go back in here. Let's grab, again, this kind of a mid-tone light. I don't think I was quite done with the other areas here. And then we'll just scratch, 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 scratch. Fill, 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 fill. And we're just going to be doing a quick render in ZBrush for my thumbnail. So I'm not, and it'll probably be like, again, bust. Maybe, you know what, maybe full body if he's sitting in a tree. Oh, we got 1 minute left. I have to make a tree and pose it. Okay, I'm on my own channel, so I don't have to worry about stepping on anybody's toes, so we can stay a little bit longer. Polypaint too, you know, when we're going in here and adding those pebbling, like the little pebbly pass, also consider doing that with your Polypaint too. It just makes sense, you know, big animal splotches basically. And actually, looking at his belly, he does have some little things that keep him camouflaged, little hereditary coloring things. that we can add. Perfect. Okay, so perfect is in the sense that I saw those splotches and we can add them. So we have this here. I'm gonna keep going lighter. We're gonna keep knocking everything back. So we're gonna go in here and I'm just gonna say this one here, sample. There's about as bright as we're gonna get. Again, up here is very yellow, so we'll keep that too. But also for the rest of the body, I'm just gonna go through and again, we're just gonna keep going lighter and lighter and lighter. Go in there and put in the moles and color the bumps. And again, we'll also do a cavity patch really quick just to kind of make those pop a little bit. It's been a while since I've done this, so I hope everything I'm saying is going to pan out. We seem to be doing okay. And then, yeah, you know, just real quick, lighter pass for the whole body, really quickly, just kind of evening out all the stuff. I didn't put a whole lot of wrinkles on his belly. Should probably go back and do that. I totally just ignored the belly part. It's a little too smooth. This is one of those zone out tasks too. And that it's so zone out, depending on what kind of fidelity you're going for, that it may be even good to just like, you can just sit there and like kind of watch a movie or a TV show. Okay, so belly, we definitely need a little help. RGB off, Z add on, alpha off. Really quickly, because again, I just left it too broad. So we'll get some general wrinkles in here. Standard brush, lazy mouse on. Kind of looks like veins a little bit, but kind of not. Kind of like leathery skin veins. And then we'll turn off X symmetry down the middle, because it's just a little too much to have. And we should probably be a little lower resolution. We'll say the resolution sort of in level 4. I'm going to grab his belly here, minus the arms. X symmetry on, sorry. There we go. And then hold down Alt, let go of Alt, and we'll exaggerate this area here a little bit. And then let's go one more lower, go in here with our pinch brush, and turn on our simulation iterations, turn off X symmetry, and just kind of go through and just tappa. Yeah, I'm going to go through and tap to exaggerate some of these wrinkles, and I'm going to go back in and get a little skin direction to help supplement too. And then back up, damn standard 02, and then skin direction pass. It looks like it gets a little scaly along the front of the belly too, which we can totally do, just like we did on the back. A little more subtle. Skin direction, skin direction, skin direction. Working quick, working quick. Live stream. Gotta get to work on my real job. Okay, and then a little bit of crusty, reptile-y skin right in here. Let's go quickly, just kind of, just to start to get a little taste or a little feel for a little more pebbly through here. And again, use your brush contrast, contrast delta. There's even a contrast slider in your deformation menu under tool deformation you can use. Okay, now control. Okay, so these red spots here, we're just going to sample, make a little darker, a little more saturated, a little more red. Standard brush on, RGB on, Z add off, and it does these literally look like airbrushed on there, so I'm just going to follow that. Obviously, if you have good reference of an animal type that's similar to this or would help telegraph what you're trying to message, by all means. But we'll go ahead and just put some dots on the back here. And again, little camo pattern, you can kind of weave some of these shapes in here. Again, just give it a little bit of speckling and spots that'll kind of break up the pattern so that they can be a little more camouflaged. Maybe up around his neck too, a little bit, tiny bit. And then go back in here, alpha 23, light color, desaturated color, and X symmetry turned on. And one final quick pass over. Again, we're being super heavy-handed, but we got to move quick. And we can also do major adjustments, which is useful as well. So if we think everything's fine, except I think I went a little too saturated on my undercoat, and I'm kind of regretting that, or whatever, you can do major adjustments too. You can use it. You can mask off areas, or you can mask by color and then tweak. So we'll do that in just a second. And again, this alpha is making everything super pebbly, and he's not that pebbly all over. So I like the breakup of it, but we may go back in with this alpha off and then just do another quick, not really a smoothing pass. You can hold down shift and turn off Z-add, and then you can literally just smooth your polypaint if you want. We don't need to do that. We don't need to go to that extreme, but did I lose something? Shift, there we go. Make these a little darker, redder. So, for example, orange. I really want to just the major stuff here. A little more saturated. X symmetry turned on. Okay. Really hit these golden zones. Really highlight through here. And also, you know, going back in and doing a little bit of color breakup too, if you need to. Go back in and you can come back in on top and, you know, dial in a little bit of the magentas and the purples and all that stuff too. So you can always go back in, drop your RGB intensity down and do that. Good enough. So, oh, we were talking about this. So if we go down here to our Polypaint menu, you can go in here and you can say adjust colors. And if you want to adjust like, oh, just the interior of his mouth, you can drag from here onto here. That'll pick the color and it'll mask based on this tolerance, just that area. And then you can say, you know, you can hide the mask if you want to. And then if it's unmasked in here, you can go through and you can do hue saturation adjustments or whatever you want. For example, if you hit OK, it'll go ahead and keep that mask for you. If you just want to do overall adjustments, you can go in here and again just hue shift it over. Oops. Off. Hue shift if you want, so you can like a little more red or a little more yellow, a little more saturation for your hue or a little less. RGB intensity, you can crank it up a little bit. I'm just going to go a little more intense here. You can just kind of look in overall. Anyway, change all that stuff, hit OK, that'll update. You can undo it if you want after you see it in here. I think we're OK. Okay, so we got Polypaint. For the materials here, oh, I need to do his beak. So here, I'm going to go into the material real quick. Modifiers, I'm going to crank up the diffuse on the, drag from this, sorry, onto the toy plastic material diffuse. We're going to crank that up a little bit. And then for the skin shader 4, that's another thing just to remember is you can go in here and crank up the material properties too if you want to exaggerate again, just for a render. Okay, the beak. Sample. C, Alt-Tab. Airbrush. Make your airbrush sound effect. Over here. This stays that. And in fact, I'm going to kind of bleed some of the mouth color onto the lower beak, it looks like. And then over here as well. Kind of bleed that over. Whatever. See, more saturated. Right down the top, just a really bright splash. And maybe a little darker too. This is actually pretty blue, so we're going to go a little less saturated, a little darker. And then this material does look a little more toy plasticky. Also, this skin shader is probably pretty accurate, but I'm going to go through here and do a specular. We'll just crank up the specular just to make them a little shinier, a little wetter-ish, and then we may even steal this. So I'm going to drag from here onto our toy plastic. I'm going to grab the beak, M, color, fill object. We're just filling with the material here. Alt-tap the lower beak, color, fill object, and then go back here to our skin shader 4, and then we could even paint. Oh, also the tongue. Damn, so many things I gotta do. Let's turn everything back on. Did I lose my tongue? There it is. That's there. Yeah, so this, I'm going to darken it just a bit. And then we're going to go back in here. Let's go into solo mode. We're going to put just some speckles on here of this variety. Oh, Control D, Control D. We need more resolution here. RGB, not M. There we go. Through here. And then going back to this color here. And then alpha off. And we'll just darken this up a little bit. RGB intensity down. And because tongues aren't generally just super flat, shiny surfaces, this is where maybe going in with your standard brush, turn your Z intensity back on, and just kind of going through and doing a little pebbly pass or something. Go in here with your damn standard 02 and just kind of break up these edges, put in some wrinkles, whatever. Little indications of a little grabby tongue. All right. Posing, and then Fibermesh. Control N to clear a canvas. Quick save. Let's append the ZSphere. E. Transparency. W. So tree. Q. Or tree nook. We don't have to show the whole tree, but just the little area they're sitting in. I'm just going to make a real quick tree. Hit W to go into move mode. Move the stuff around, hit Q to move stuff around. So we'll give them a little cradle to kind of sit in. A little tree cradle here. Q. I think there's even there used to be a tree creator with a ZSphere tree creator. So you can Google ZSphere tree, and I think you'll get to the forum post that has like a plugin for that type of thing. So there's this little cradle. Let's make this startup material here. We'll hit A for adaptive skin. We'll say underneath your, I'll do it down here. Adaptive skin, dynamic down to 0, density down to 1. If you hit make adaptive skin, it keeps your ZSphere here, and then it spits out a skin ZSphere that's your actual geometry. So we'll go ahead and say append that. The ZSphere we don't need anymore, so we'll just delete it, and then we can just start sculpting this. Control D, clay tubes, solo mode, and moving. So we still have our, we still have our simulation iterations up with our move brush, so it's turning it into cloth, but I don't actually hate it. I actually, I think that might work for just an organic tree kind of look. Actually made like a little hand to kind of cup his little chubby body while he sits in the tree. Okay, so another clay buildup pass here. Control D, and of course you could Dynamesh, you could Sculptris Pro, all the stuff we've talked about, but this is literally just to go through and have something for him to sit on. Crank up that Z intensity just a bit. And we won't do Fibermesh or anything for the tree or any moss or anything like that. Just something for him to sit on that is vaguely brown. Maybe not quite that saturated. And I also don't want it to compete with his body, so we can always hue shift it away from being too samey, so he stands out from it. But all right, now let's see if I remember the best way to go about this, because I want to move all of his stuff. There is proxy pose we can use. I probably want to do a Transpose Master just to bring everything together. So the cool thing about how we worked is we have subdivision history for everything. So if I go here and I say all low, pretty much everything has a lower res version. So when I want to go pose this, that'll be pretty easy. If you didn't have that, you can literally just hit the down arrow key through all your subtools and turn on proxy pose. I'm going to give you some resources for this because it's cool. And my YouTube channel, ZBrush 2023, what's new? Scroll down until you see like proxy pose with ZSphere rigging, Transpose Master with ZSphere rigging, ZRemesh project history, and refresher proxy pose. All of this stuff is good, so check that out. Okay, sorry, it's been a while since I moved over here. I do read the chat, but I'm moving fast. I'm trying to do a whole character in a live stream. So I may have to skip some of the questions if they go off too much off topic, not towards what I'm trying to do here. Cool. How do you do? Project. Yeah, Pure Ref, Orlando. Nice. I used to live there for about 2 years. Dam standard. I didn't change anything. That should just be the default dam standard. I don't think I did any major changes there. Oh, we're all high, all low, so we're in good shape. All high. There we go. Oh yeah, brush size. If you want to use the bracket keys like Photoshop, you can do that. I tap S to do draw size, but yeah, brackets will work too. Oh, excellent. Thank you, Kazuki, for your kind words. Yeah, you can use, yeah, so like I said here, you can use layers for paint. I don't generally use them, but you can use them for paint, masking, and geometry changes. Yeah, I'll use Fibermesh for the hairs, I think. ZBrush stroke works the opposite. Is there a fix for that, or is it just a bug? If you mean it's going from Z add, so for example, my standard brush is by default set to Z add, and my Damien standard brush is set to Z sub. That's just the way the brushes are set up, and you can change that up here. You can just go to Z add or Z sub, or just hold down Alt when you want to switch between them. I think that's what you're talking about. Absolutely, no problem. Glad the videos are helping. Cool, excellent. Thank you, Prometheus. Right on, right on. Awesome. That's right. Cool. So yes, use proxy pose. If you don't have subdivision history, we have subdivision history, so I think I'm going to use that. But yeah, proxy pose is really, really useful. In fact, well, watch the videos. They'll go into it, but you can actually increase your detail by using proxy pose by scaling everything down. It's really neat. So anyway, let's go ahead and pose this guy out. First thing we're going to do, if we go in here to Z plugin and we say, ooh, I just lost it. What are we doing? Transpose Master. If you look at this, this is Transpose Master is going to take the lowest subdivision of all of our subtools and put them all together, and then we can actually use a ZSphere Rig. If I turn this on, it'll put a ZSphere in there, and then I can build a rig. But if I want to reuse a rig, what I might do first is just go ahead and append a ZSphere into our scene, like we did for our tree. Hit X to go into X symmetry, E to scale down, go into transparency mode, and I'm going to go through here and hit W and just kind of put these generally where his hips kind of ish would be. Q to go into draw mode, W to move this out, and then Q draw mode, and I'm going to go all the way down to his toes. And then Q, heel, Q, just tapping in the middle, knee, and actually this should be more like ankle, and we'll cheat it down a little bit. And again, these are just, it's a hierarchy, so you can put as many bones. It's not like we're going into, well, we're going into rigging, so it's not, you don't have to be like super accurate or anything like that. And we want to maintain, just like rigging, we want to go about center of the mesh here. And in fact, we can even put a little clavicle control here. So I'm going to go maybe here and then over to the shoulder. And I'm not worried too much about the Z-sphere size. Doesn't matter. It's the location that's going to be, I don't think, it's the location of the Z-sphere that's going to be the influence of that area. And again, all the way down here to the wrist, or the mid palm in this case, and then Q up here to wrist, and then Q elbow. Again, just center mass. And then I know I'm going to need some helpers in here. So again, watch those videos. They'll explain the hows and the whys. I know what I'm probably going to need, so I'm just making an educated guess without having to like show and explain. But if you want that explanation, please check out those links I sent. Okay. Same thing on the back. If I want to maintain a little roundness in this butt, I might put in a little helper. Not from here necessarily, the way he's built, but maybe in here. Little helper joints to maintain volume, and then the tail, obviously. So straight back here, where the tail attaches to the body, and then Q, straight back. And then depending on how much resolution you want for your tail, as far as like being able to loop it around, just put some joints in there with Q. You know what? I'm going to maintain volume in the front here, and I think I'm also going to need to maintain volume in the back if I was a betting man. So I'm going to put these little helper joints, just, you know what, just one volume here. Working our way up here. Let's say this goes to the base of the neck, and then top of the head. Maybe put the bottom of the, so here's the base where it goes into the body. Here's the base of the head where it goes into the skull. And then, we could maybe even try, I'm gonna hit Q right here, and then I'm gonna put an upper jaw here, and then a lower jaw. We'll try it here. And all of this stuff we can always pose separately. It's not a big deal. I don't know what it's going to do to the corners of the mouth. Also the ears, we can actually put, again, it's all just a hierarchy. You know what? Let's start from this area here, the upper jaw. I'll just say that is going to be the child of that. And then again, to the base of the ear here, Q. Depending on how much fidelity you want to kind of bend these ears, you need to build it in. And the cool thing about doing like a neutral pose too is you can, you now have the leeway, and again we'll go center mass. We have the leeway to do different poses. So if I want him in a tree, or I want him fighting Yoda or whatever, I can That'd be a cool scene. I can go through and do that with the same file and not have to be like have a bespoke file where he's just in doing one thing and then I gotta go do a start from scratch-ish in order to do another scene. I always have a neutral I can go back to. Now granted, if you are gonna, you know, after you're done posing, spend a lot of quality time. Let's go all the way to the end of the finger here. Spend a lot of quality time where you need to, because after you pose, you know, the wrinkles are going to change, the musculature is going to change, details may even change depending on the storytelling you want to do. So definitely do that work. The more work you put in, the more it sells it, is an idea. But there we go. So we got our, and again, if you need feet or different toe control, you can do that. If you don't, I wouldn't worry too much about it. But just in case, I'll do from this branch back here. Actually, I'm going to push this forward. I'm going to put one branch in here, and I'm going to come out from that branch forward. And I don't think I'll need heel control, but W, Q, W. And if you turn off transparency, ghost transparency, it'll actually snap to any visible meshes, so that might be useful to you too. I forgot about that, but use that to your advantage. So Q, knuckle, Q, W to knuckle. All right, I think we're good. Got everything we need. So this is a ZSphere rig. So we can go through here. If I want to just save this off by itself, because we can call this, rename this rig, I can clone this off and I can save it. So if I ever want to bring this in and pose with it later, I can. Call it Salacious Rig Z tool, and then we'll delete that. So now we have this in, we can store in memory before we go into Transpose Master. In fact, you know what? Just to play it safe, I'm going to clone it off so that it's sitting out here. We'll do a quick save. I'm going to delete this rig here. I'm going to hide this. I don't need to send it over. So everything I see here, I'm going to send over so we can pose it. And then I'll bring the tree in separately. I'm going to go in here to T-Pose Mesh. I do want to say, hey, I'm going to be using a ZSphere rig. But before I head in there, I'm going to go to this rig. I'm going to store it. And then we're going to go back here and we're going to say, okay, Transpose Mesh. It's going to drop everything to lowest, send it on over. If your lowest is a proxy pose, no problem. It'll send your proxy pose over. And then I'm going to say paste rig with the rig selected. Give it a second. There we go. So now if we go down here to our rigging, we can say bind mesh. And then as we go through and start rotating all these things around, his body will follow. Now this type of thing here, we can put in a helper joint. So, and again, we'd have to update our original rig, but if you start seeing issues like this, we can go through and say, okay, undo, we'll unbind our mesh. I'll put in, damn. You know what, just off of here, I'm gonna say, put in a little helper joint just to kind of maintain this volume so that the arms don't grab it. And then we'll say bind mesh again. So now when I go through and rotate, there we go. That little joint there will maintain that volume. So now we need our tree. So I'm going to go back here. We're going to select it, hop back into our rig here. We're going to append our tree. And I think we're good to go. Guess we can turn transparency off too. Okay, so let's go ahead and put him in this tree, just kind of chilling. And like most of the time you see him, he's literally just kind of chilling, arm up, relaxed, cackling. So we'll go through here and we'll say, just do a real quick rotate. We'll have X symmetry. X symmetry turned on for now, I suppose. And in this case, if you're moving down the bone, you can actually hit W and it'll actually do a pretty good job. And again, this is just a parent-child hierarchy, so you can go in here. And again, if you rotate the joint itself, it'll rotate around that axis. If you rotate the bone, it'll rotate them. and all of the children. So use all this to your advantage. I'm going to go ahead and turn off X symmetry, and we'll kind of put one leg up. Oh, he's getting a little wrinkly. One leg down. Is he too high res? That's concerning. Let's see how this works out. So I'm going to go ahead and lean him back a little bit, and then lean him forward, and we'll kind of pooch his belly out a little bit. And again, because we have helper joints in here, we can literally go in here with our move brush and move around this entire section that has an influence. Yeah, it looks like I should have maybe gone a little lower. We'll have him like peering down at us. So I'm going to go through here, oops, rotate here, so rotate down, and then here's the lower of his, here's his skull here, and then we can have him kind of like looking down at us. And then because we put these in here, you can actually go through and like open up his mouth a little bit, or his jaw if he's like yelling at us, and then we can perk his ear up here. And actually we may need to have a helper joint here, because as I'm moving the ear, those influences are grabbing his face. So just another, as I'm going through, always do a calisthenics test before you go through. But also remember, I can go through here later and just move the ear separately. I don't have to use ZSpheres. It's just a nice thing to use while we're in here. So we'll put his arm down here, and we'll rotate this over. And again, if we want to rotate down the joint, just rotate. I think, can I? Maybe this wrist. And the cool thing about the stilted nature of what I'm doing is it kind of works for the type of character this is. He's kind of a puppet. They kind of are a little tiny bit stilted in its own kind of cool way. So, and again, all the finger movements we're doing, we can always go back into the geo and do that. We don't have to rely on ZSpheres to do all the heavy lifting. It's just pick and choose your battles. That wrinkly leg, I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe I needed more joints along that path. I'm not sure. I can fix it. It's not a huge deal. It's just kind of irritating. So we got, yeah, we got one leg here. Let's see. One arm forward. Maybe we'll do one arm back. Kind of grabbing onto the tree here. And again, rotate up and around. Sorry, I feel like this live stream's been pretty slow. I guess it's not a terrible thing, but not my usual, you know, blasting through different techniques. It's been like, here's 3 techniques, use those for hours. Rotate, rotate. Oof. And again, you could do this as like an 85% pass. It doesn't have to be all final or anything. Just something to get you close enough. You know what, let's do, can I do one leg way high? And again, I might have to go through and do some major cleanup. Not a big deal. I'll live. Looks like I put an extra ZSphere over there that's causing problems. We'll rotate this around if I can. Rotate up, rotate up. All right, there he is being his little self. The tree I don't need here anymore, so I'll go ahead and say delete. Okay, everybody crush your fingers. It should spit it back out over. So I'm going to say T-pose to sub T, and it's going to take all the low-res versions and spit it over here and move everything into place. Is it going? Yeah, okay, it's done. It did it. turn on Colossum with ZSphere Rig. I wonder if you could. That would be interesting. You're right. Yeah, as you're moving stuff around, have it kind of wrinkle up. I agree with that. Will I be able to post the link to that video I was mentioning earlier in the stream here? I think so. Give it a shot. Let's see. Okay, so really quickly, I'm gonna go go back to the body here because I need to fix some wrinkly legs for some reason. Go here. I'm gonna turn off Polypaint while we just focus in on fixing what happened here. Oops. Oh no. Oh, Xmetry off maybe. It's doing something crazy. Let's do this. Let's go in here and say save as. See Transpose Master data. Let's go into what are we doing? Streaming Salacious 8. We'll do Salacious 7 posed. And then I'm going to shut this down and we'll kick it back up. Cool. Yeah, you can. So you can do posable symmetry because we did have a symmetrical base mesh. You can turn on posable symmetry and still continue to work across an axis. If you want to work on the elbow and work on the elbow here, I think if you go in here to transform, activate symmetry, use posable, it'll look at your symmetry and try to use that. But you know, because his elbows are bent differently, I don't really need it. So let's go through here. I'm going to do a quick smooth and inflate. Oh no. What is going on here? Smooth brush works. Just none of my other brushes. Activate symmetry off, obviously. What is it doing? Is it like a morph on here that keeps causing problems? Think. What weird gremlin did I bring over? No? What? In the tree? Deleting the tree do something? Well, let me think. I can... does it do it? Is it just the body or does it do all the subtools? Just the body. Okay. Luckily, I think I can fix those. Let me see. Go in here to load tool. I'm going to grab our original unposed guy that should have... Oh no. Hold on. This is where being tired and in a live stream does not help. Quick save. There we go. Save as. Okay. Now, sorry. Quick save. We've got our load here posed. Let's see if I can fix this. Not sure why I would be having a problem. It's the first time I've ever run into this. Okay, boo. However, let's go through here. I'm going to say first, preferences, edit. Nope, preferences, import, export, export. I'm going to make sure group is turned off. Export onto my desktop body OBJ. And then I'm going to say delete whatever the hell's going on there. I'm going to go back to my original body here. We're going to go to subdivision level 1. We're going to import over sub D1 our body that's posed. Yay. And then we're going to go back. Subdivision level 2, subdivision level 3. Okay, so our details are still there. Can I sculpt on it? Yes. Okay. I don't know why that was an issue, but I think we're in good shape. Polypaint's good. I'm going to say delete other. We're going to go back to our posed. We're going to insert our body. And we saved it. Whew. Again, I don't know why that would be an issue, but whatever. Now, let's go and fix really quickly. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to fix, I'm not going to fix everything because I want to, oh, what? Why is this doing that? Body. Is it the file? Is there something about being in here? Okay, I'll fix this then. Let's try this. Control F, test. I'm gonna grab everything out of this weirdo file because boy, it does not like it. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna leave the body alone. I'm gonna say Z plugin. What am I gonna say? Subtool master. We're gonna copy folder. We're gonna go back to this body that we can sculpt on. Verify, yes. We're going to say paste folder. I'm going to kill this gremlin file, delete all, nothing to do with it. Everybody cross your fingers. Can sculpt on this one now. And everything's here. Delete folder, insert. I always like to have my little Polymesh star as my name catcher. E or W scale with my gizmo. Good enough. Whew, save as. I don't know what the hell that was. Interesting. We fixed it. Streaming, Salacious, 7 posed. Ah, okay. Something weird there. Okay, so now back to the body. Subdivision level 1. Turn off Polypaint. Go through here, and again, these are all things that could be remedied. Oh, please let me be able to sculpt on this. Is it subdivision level 1 that's breaking? Like, really? It's just subdivision level 1. I don't know why. We can work with subdivision level 2. I don't know what that is. Okay. Use Modo before you think it's a superior modeling program. Most people, based on online sentiments and things. If I've learned anything in my 20 years of doing this, is online sentiment, or even it's a hobbyist conversation essentially. If you ask a bunch of internet hobbyists what's the best thing to use, they're going to say whatever they're going to say. But in my experience, if you know how to like extrude a face and bevel an edge, I've seen people doing astounding things in Max, Maya, Modo, Blender, 3D Code, ZBrush, Cinema 4D. They're all at this in 2023 extruding faces and beveling edges. Now, granted, there's caveats and there's some cool tools that others have that others don't. That depending on your workflow, might really enhance that. But I haven't noticed that. I mean, I need more funding for my research to really get the numbers on this exact, but I haven't noticed anybody who's like so amazing. I don't want to use names, but there's tons of people who have never touched Modo who do amazing work, and there's tons of people who have used Modo and also do amazing work, and vice versa. But yeah, I did use Modo way back when I was doing like early Doom stuff. What was I working on? I can show you some fan art from back then. I can go on my Sketchpad for that, but yeah, it's been a while. Cool. Yeah, exactly. Delete, reconstruct. Yeah, for some reason that sub D1 is not playing nicely, so we'll stick with sub D2 while we work. I don't know. I'll dig into that in a second or later, not on this. So clay brush. Subdivision level 2 does have some of our detail, so we may need to rebuild some of that, but we're just going to go through here with our clay brush. And again, anything that has a major pose change, you want to make sure that it looks like the two objects are interacting. So whenever you do an IMM brush, or anything in CG where two things come in contact with each other, make sure you take the extra time to go through and make that skin really compress and push around the other object. It just sells the idea that these two things are interacting. Here, arm up, finger out. Okay, these legs. And I think this might have been a fidelity issue too, as far as And it also got rid of my polygroups when I imported, because I didn't want to. I wonder if I could have UV'd it with those. And I'm taking like a nuclear path from orbit on some of these changes here, or I'm just like smoothing it out just to get rid of that, and then I'll go back in really quickly and just do an inflate. Again, not ideal. And in fact, also consider maybe Z-spheres not what you need, you know. Let's say visibility hide point, invert. Sometimes it's masking and transposing is fine. You don't have to use Z-spheres. They're just kind of fun to use. In demo with, I should say. Fun to see it move around and be posed, right? Okay, and we'll go back in here and just do a quick inflate pass. Again, I can build back up the musculature or whatever, but good enough for government work. One thing I completely forgot to pose is the tail. But you know what we could do? Since there's not much going on there anyways, I can just say I'm going to hide this tail real quick. I'm going to go through here and just append. I can use an IMM brush, but I'll just append a Z-sphere. It's a little more control. I'm going to take a Z-sphere here. We're going to scale it down, and we'll just do a tail really quickly. And the cool thing about it is I can go W, and the base of the tail will be yay big. And then the point of the tail will be smaller. So lower to get the natural taper. And then if I just want to go through and just have the tail like loop around this tree, I can say, okay, fine. The tail is going to go end up right here. And then I hit Q, and as I work my way down the tail, it'll get increasingly smaller. So we'll move this over, and we'll move this up. And again, just add the fidelity that you need. And you know what? Maybe we'll play into the monkey part here. Maybe I'll loop it over so it hangs down here, and then this goes back and around. So we'll say you go back here, and then Q, move, and then Q, move. Spending a lot more time on this live stream than I was anticipating, but that's okay. So we got our tail in here. Great. I'm going to hit A for adaptive skin again. Resolution down, Dynamesh resolution down to 0. Again, it's all down here under your adaptive skin. Density down 0. Wait, what's going on? Density down, Dynamesh density, adaptive skin preview. So A. Discard changes. There we go. So just very simple geometry. We're going to say make adaptive skin. We're going to append our tail back. Z-sphere we're going to delete. Skin Z-sphere is our new geometry. We're going to hit Control D to subdivide. If you want to smooth this out, you can just do a real quick polish by feature open circle. Hit Control W to make all one polygroup. And I'm just going to tap, whoop, tap, tap, tap to smooth, and then inflate. And that'll just inflate along its surface normal to get your volume back. And then you can come back in here and just kind of move to smooth that stuff out too. Excuse me. So now we'll go through here. Smooth, move, smooth, move. Smooth, move. Inflate, brush if you need to inflate, spot inflate any areas. Okay. Base, C, fill, Control D, Control D. Oops, I should have paid more attention. I mean, we're not going to probably do a turnaround of this, so I'm not overly concerned, but, you know, due diligence. Should have made sure this went in and then came out and back around. Inflate. Alt Z here. Go ahead and turn off RGB for a clay brush because we don't want to paint while we use clay brush. We just want to do that and then hold down shift and turn off RGB for smooth because we don't want to smooth our poly paint. We just want to move that down here. There we go. We got our cute little guy. We got our tail. I'm going to go ahead and just real quick. Standard brush, RGB. You can also use BPA, your paintbrush. I was going to break up this a little bit and then also C darker. Put some dots along here. Ugh. Okay. All right. After this point, it's all just kind of rendering out. I do need to modify some of this stuff too. They got a little crunchy inflate, but anyway, you get the point. You know how to do this stuff and figure it out, and then hit W. You can also control drag. Remember, you can control drag down the object and then use like mask lasso and just moving your pivot to go through here and make any of these changes. Of course, your nails have to go along with it, so make sure you go back in here. You can also use move multiple, but you can also just turn off X symmetry on all your subtools now that there's not symmetry anymore. And there you go. We have our little, let's go in here to Skin Shader 4. Yay! We got our little Salacious Chrome guy. Oh, one more thing we do have to do, and this is just going to be the same thing. Go through here and mask pin, and we'll set up a fiber mesh here. So we're going to mask this area. Again, first thing you want to do, go down here to display properties, make sure double is off. Let's turn that up so we can see it. Oh, one thing we need to do too is the crevice. I'll show you that in a second. So mask, actually we'll do that first just because it makes sense in this order. So we're going to go in here to masking and we're going to say mask by, let's do mask by cavity. That'll go through and do a quick mask. You can adjust this mask if you want to. So if you want to blur it a little bit, you can. It'll just go through and blur just a little bit, which I think we do want to do. And then also over here, we can say reset this, and then as you apply it, you can go say, I'm going to make it more like this, and that'll pick up, well, let's see, like this. There we go. So you can change the curve of your mask to pick up more or less areas. That didn't work too terribly. Let's do this. Undo, undo. Oops. Redo. I think that'll work. So we now have cavities masked out, and if we look at any of this reference in the little cracks and stuff, it gets a little darker, and then some of the areas it might get a little lighter, so we'll play into that a little bit. So in order to paint while we have stuff masked, we're going to go in here and say turn off view mask. It's still masked, but we can see a little bit better, and if we want to turn that back on, we can. I'm going to control tap to invert that, so we're going to be painting in the cracks. So again, turn off view mask. We're going to go through here, we're going to sample, maybe push this a little darker, a little more red. RGB intensity just turned on, and now we can just go through here and just pop these little cavity areas here, and then of course we can control tap to invert that, turn off view mask, and then you can come in here and make it a little lighter, make it a little less saturated, and you can go through here and you can pop the details. You can also mask by a lot of different masks you can do, peaks and valleys, curvature, all of those are cool to play with. AO. So you can go through, and let's go, you know what, sometimes it's also useful to go through here, and instead of doing dark cracks, you can go in here and you can go and do light cracks. If you have a darker area of skin and you want like dirt, darker dirt to be, or lighter dirt, you know, if he's in a sandy area, it might make more sense to have lighter skin wrinkles, and then control tap to invert that, and then go in here and say sample darken, and then we'll kind of darken the area around the lighter skin cracks. You know, sometimes that's useful depending on what you're making. Anyway, cool. Now, quick fiber mesh, just to kind of round this out. Mask where you want your fibers to go. Make sure display properties double is off, or it's going to put fibers on both sides of your mesh. Go in here to your, if you want to know fiber mesh cards, how to make that, go back to part 1. But we're going to go and use, we're just going to do nice fine fiber mesh. We're going to say, if I can find it, let me see, fiber mesh. What was I doing? Okay, preview. So here's our preview of our fiber mesh. Let's go ahead and so we're going to go dark orange to light orange. We're going to say here, and I'm going to sample kind of a darkish orange to a lighter orange for our tip. And again, we can colorize, we can literally go in and Polypaint. So it's not like this is super necessary of a step, but whatever. Also, I'm going to turn this gravity down so it kind of sticks up from him. And we're going to change those max fibers and up the coverage just a bit, just to give it a little bit of a thicker read here. One thing we are going to do, if we're going to comb this into a shape, we want more than 3 segments. So we're going to grab this and maybe crank it up to like 9 segments or so. The more segments we give it, the more you're going to notice that twist property that's in there. I don't know that we need a twist. We're going to clump that, so we'll go ahead and turn that down. And again, so if you want to make a little more length, change your length profile up. Then you can hold down shift to smooth this down. So also the segments also helps the base. So base color, tip, etc. And again, we can Polypaint. So if we're happy-ish with this, we can say, okay, great, I'm going to accept this. And we'll say yes. Essentially what yes does is go down here to preview settings and turn on fast preview. You can turn it on and off here. If you have fast preview, you can knock this down. So if you're having a little trouble with performance, you can sculpt these and it'll propagate out those changes to these. We didn't set up any poly groups, but that's fine. We can do that after the fact if we'd like. Let's hold down shift, turn off Polypaint for now. And we'll go here. So for example, we've got these fibers and we want to like go start clumping them. So we can go through here and control drag with our mask brush, control tap to invert that. And then we can literally go in here. If you're going to use any brushes, so like BG, brush groom, hair toss, or whatever, all of these brushes have, unless it's like groom hair lengthen, it'll go down here. If to Fibermesh, it'll have preserve length up and then some sort of collision tolerance. We'll put that down. So now we can actually go through and like comb our hair, which is sometimes useful, but really just going through here and just using move and then using pinch to kind of clump. And while it's in this state, you can hit Control W and make its own polygroups. If you want to get that clump back, you can. Or if you want to isolate it out and then just go through here and just start, you know, clumping this a little bit. Again, preserve length with your brushes, move, shift to smooth, go through there and just kind of do whatever you wanted to do with all this stuff. And using move, and we'll go back through and we'll do a, oops. There we go. So as I'm going through and clumping, I'm just going to, you know, do your big clumps and then go in and break those big clumps down into smaller clumps if you want. Actually, now that I think about that, with my pinch brush, make sure that elasticity, yeah, simulation iterations, let's try it on. That's not bad. Maybe leave them on. Also, if it's easier, while you're here, you can say hide point and then Control Shift drag and get rid of these ones. And you can just work on this separately. If it's having a weird interaction with this, and also on your move brush, preserve length up or down, whatever you want to do to maintain the length you can. Also spiral and twist you can use. Control W to make its own polygroup. And it should have auto mask fiber mesh, so it should mask the bottom of your fibers, I think, ish. And you can also use just straight up visibility. So if I want to go through here and say, hey, all of these I want to be one polygroup, you can. And then last but not least, this area here. So yeah, All of this can be one polygroup, I suppose. Control W, Alt Y. Move. Yada, yada, yada. And then, let's see, let's comb these all in one direction. I'm gonna go through here and just kind of pull these forward a little bit here. I was thinking about clumping and I wasn't thinking about, hey, what do I actually want to do with this hair? Duh. So let's go through here. And also another thing you do, you can turn on a move and then turn mask by polygroups up. So that way I can go through and move these things while seeing the rest of the hair and still only move, you know, the first polygroup that I touch will be the only one that I move here. So anyway, just a different way to kind of go through, move, scale, and rotate and clump your hair. And if you want to turn this off and just go in here to like brush groom, hair toss or whatever, go through and just kind of comb your hair, and then you can go back in and clump it later. So all sorts of ways to kind of mess around with your hair. I kind of like that look. It's kind of got like a cool little little flip. Yeah, we'll keep it. And then again, just go through here and isolate. Let's go back here to select rectangle. There we go. So we can grab our clumps that we already have and then just go back in and just kind of separate out these tips. And you can get as granular as you want with these tips as well. So if you want to go through here and say, hey, I like this one, but I kind of want to clump this part together, feel free. Etc., etc. Yeah, we should probably do that here too. Whoa. Hide point, invert, there we go. Also, if you need to break up the smoothness of this hair and kind of crinkle it up, kind of like, you know, he is very Muppety. So we can go through here, brush, groom, turbulence, and just kind of just tap in just a little bit of that turbulence. One thing I should have mentioned is, first of all, I need to fix this. Yuck. When we go through and render this, you're going to notice it goes from like little splines or little curves and it kind of fattens them up. That's all of these settings that we have in here. So underneath Fibermesh BPR settings, it's subdividing it twice. Actually, we don't need to subdivide it twice, we'll say once. Giving it 4 sides, giving it a little tip anisotropic on the render. So we'll do a little turbulence and we'll go through and just kind of smooth out some of the little frizzies. You can do flyaways, you can grab individual hairs and just kind of pull them out. Brush groom. Again, just a little turbulence here and then just a little smooth. And like we mentioned before, if you turn on Polypaint, it started with a root to tip Polypaint, but of course if you want to go through here and then grab your standard brush and RGB turned on, and we'll go ahead and sample this, you can go through and just Polypaint. It will let you. I think, yeah. So you can kind of break up the color there. It's kind of hard to see, but we'll switch it back over to Skin Shader 4. Alrighty. I think we're good to go. Good enough. Cool. I'm still not seeing a link in my. Are you on YouTube? Let me just check YouTube real quick. I gotta run to work. Let me go to my YouTube. See if I can read. See if the chat in here has links. shot, yes. Yeah, the high fly. I don't see any links in my chat. If you dipped it, modeling with iPad for rough sculpting, then exporting to ZRemesh for further development. I haven't personally. I don't have an iPad, but yeah, if I want to sit on the couch and sculpt, for sure, why not? Dynamic brush works for cavity painting. You change it by so a dynamic brush works for. Oops, I just lost it. I got a new trim dynamic brush works for cavity painting. You change it by clicking Z add on and off to paint cavities and Z sub out. Oh, awesome! Yeah, cool. Yeah, use trim dynamic to go through and paint cavities too. Good call. And then yeah, you can use your redshift renderer too. So render, redshift renderer, turn that on, and then set up all your materials and stuff for redshift rendering. Yes, Greaser Crumb, that's exactly right. Cool, thanks. 3D print, Fibermesh is the way to go. But any trick to use adaptive for 3D printing? You can fatten them up, you can inflate them, and then Dynamesh them together. Again, like you said, not great and not super controllable. So in that case, it's like, well, fatten it up, Dynamesh it together to make it, and then go in and sculpt on top of that with trim brushes or something like that, maybe. Polybrushed carved table. Let me see here. Making of carved table. Making of carved table. Oh boy. I don't know what website that is. Is there a... Okay, this one. Okay. Cool. So you can do it. You can do an IMM brush that'll repeat along a curve if you wanted to kind of replicate this. In fact, this would be more of a more of an extractor brush, and you can use extractor brush with radial symmetry to kind of go through and do this. Yeah. So if you wanted to do that in ZBrush, this brush here, extrude profile, not extractor. Check out the extrude profile brush, set up your geometry to be whatever kind of shapes that you want, and then turn on radial symmetry, and then just pull stuff around. It's not going to be, because it's an IMM brush, you don't have like, it's not like a Bezier curve that you can go back and change. So in that case, if you go to YouTube and say, look up ZBrush controlling curves, you can use ZSpheres to kind of dictate where your curves are. It's not as nice as this setup, but yeah, you can get something similar to that if you want to do that. Yeah. So yeah, try brush extractor, radial symmetry. I can show you really quick what it would kind of do. Let's see here. So we have X symmetry, right? So we can go in here to transform, activate symmetry in the Y, I think. Where are we at in space? Yeah. So Y symmetry, radial count of 8 or however many you want. BE, brush extrude profile. Oh, I call it extractor. You can make your own profiles, and they're just geometry profiles, or you can even use alphas. There it is, the brush alpha, brush extrude profile brush alpha. What is it? I forget the name of it. It's the exact same. There it is, curve alpha. So instead of using this, you can use different curves to go through here. Yeah. You can go through here and use alphas to make this geometry, or like I said, the brush extrude profile. Choose which profile you want, and then you can go through here and do whatever you want for taking those shapes and moving them around to get those looks. One thing to keep in mind is this is built in for kind of like a hair thing. You can also continue your strokes down if you want. So it's kind of set up to kind of leap up off the surface. If you don't want that or need that, you will control that underneath stroke. Curve modifiers, functions, curve. Repel strength, turn that down to 0, and then it won't like hop off your object, and also make sure if you want to bend start, bend end, oops, turn on all those things that you want. So you can tap off and then do more stuff and create all that. Now again, it's going to be a little more difficult to control, so in that case maybe doing Z-spheres and framing a path that you want it to follow, so it's not going to be quite as nice, or be able to like hold down shift to smooth. Actually, I think maybe you can. That's geometry. Yeah, I guess you can smooth these curves out. Just gotta be careful about where you hit it. Huh. Anyway, something like that maybe. I don't think it'll be as controllable or as cool, but cool. Excellent. All right. Thanks everybody. I'll see you later. Yeah.